and welcome, my gentle and of course very modern apes, and welcome to today's episode of SkepTalk. I'm your prime host, Erika, or Gutsy Gibbon. Today is May the 4th. Oh, okay. Dr. Adair, I know you're going to have some Star Wars jokes to make. I know you gotta have some Star Wars gags.
That's not true. That's impossible.
Yeah, okay. I'll believe it when I see it. Anyways.
That was literally a quote from Star Wars already.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. Perfect. I'm glad. See, this is why you should have been the primary host today, because it's like the Star Wars day, and I've like seen all the movies, but other than that, I'm like not very Star Wars. My Star Wars etiquette is not as sharp as it could be, as sharp as Dr. Adair's is, no doubt. For those of you just tuning in, this is SkepTalk. This is the show here on the line where we take calls from people who are telling us things that they believe and we're skeptical of. They're trying to sort of convince us to be less skeptical of those ideas. Generally, these ideas run contra to conventional science, so the types of calls that we get here on SkepTalk include things like, my beloved, cryptids, aliens, spiritual encounters, poltergeists, as well as general sort of pseudoscientific nonsense that I would put into the categories of like, or what I would put into these categories would be things like flat earth, young earth creationism, anti-vax, general climate change skepticism, things of that nature. So if you're out there and you want to sort of pitch your idea that is non-conventional to two people who are probably going to be skeptical of it, call in. The number is on your screen right now. That is going to be the web link in the description, or on this thingy here, the little bar at the bottom, 1-720-619-2288. Call in, give us your perspective. We're eager to hear from you. Dr. Adair, how are you doing, my friend? We already, by the way, hold on, time out. We're not vamping. We already have two people waiting. I actually just want to know what Dr. Adair's doing because I was eating a sandwich up to like 3 minutes before we started. So, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing okay, especially now that I finally ate something. I didn't eat most of the day so I could go to the doctor for some blood work. So the fact I wasn't hangry is actually a little bit surprising. But after that, I talked to the only monarch that I respect, the Burger King, and that took care of my problem.
You're a Burger King guy, dude?
Occasionally, at the very least, the fact that they have impossible Whopper options, that's a nice thing.
Yeah. I do like that. That's fair enough. I'm trying to like, usually when I eat fast food, it's on like road trips and stuff like that. So the fast food that I eat tends to be limited by like what's available. And usually it's like dog shit Taco Bell or like McDonald's and stuff like that. Not to say that those are bad. I do enjoy them. They wreak havoc on my guts. But I'm trying to think like my favorite. I don't know. Is BK your favorite fast food?
Not necessarily favorite, but there are things that I like there. Perhaps more often, I would favor Wendy's, but it depends on the time of day and or how willing I am to drive.
Can I tell you an experience? So my fast food foundations have been shooketh recently. I tried Popeyes for the first time in like 3 years, and it I don't know, it must have been like a special moon, or like the stars were in alignment, or something. Someone was in the water because they got my order perfect. My husband and I's orders were both to a T perfection, which is like quintessential the anti Popeyes experience. I've never been to a Popeyes is notorious for not getting your order right, and oh my god, they had that fried chicken like tender recipe down to a science. The spicy stuff, it was absolutely amazing. So I'm kind of like on the Popeyes train right now. I'm kind of like into Louisiana fast. You know what I mean?
I will say this much. I prefer Popeyes to KFC, though my wife does like to occasionally bring home a bucket.
Well, the
though I
bucket
will
is
note,
an experience, though. Like the
yes,
bucket, fair enough, you know?
yeah. Though every time I get a bucket, I always think to myself, I'm literally eating food out of a bucket. What have I become?
That's, it's not, it shouldn't be, I'm literally eating a food out of a bucket. What have I become? It should be, I get to eat food out of a bucket. What have I become? With joy and envy. I don't know. What a privilege.
I just feel like I should just get a strap, have it right to my face, and then I'd be eating it, just like out of a grain bag for a horse, and treat me like the animal I'm becoming.
Oh, dude, not the fried chicken though. That oil is the breakout would be legendary. It would be
Hmm.
unreal. I don't know. I'm
Okay.
curious. I hold on. Let me pull up chat here because I want to see what chat is thinking about the number one fast food. I'm extra
Should
double
we make that the poll?
curious. Yeah, I don't know. I'm seeing some Popeyes fans. I'm seeing Bojangles. Bojangles is great, but I don't have a Bojangles near my house. Like the closest Bojangles is pretty far from me. We've
I don't know that
got
chain at all.
yeah, it's like where's Bojangles located? Hold on. Hopefully I'm not doxing myself here. Bojangles map. Someone's got someone's got like a Bojangles heat map. Yeah, okay, I'm fine. This is like eastern and south, and I'm pretty public about being in a southern state. Bojangles does clear. Bojangles is pretty good. I don't know though, dude. There's something about the crunch of Popeye's chicken that is just like unbeatable. And
Hmm.
some people are saying Chipotle. Chipotle servings have just, I mean, you want to talk about epic fall off. The serving size at Chipotle is just not good anymore. I feel like you don't get what you're paying for. Um, there's this really, really kind of cruddy burrito place near my house, and my husband and I go there all the time. And we gotten to know the people who work there pretty well. So they're very generous with the serving sizes in the burritos and in the bowls. So like the life hack, I would say, for like getting good serving sizes at restaurants is to just go there so often that you get to know the people and then they do you a favor. It's just nepotism,
Hmm.
you know? Makes the world go round.
Oh, I'm afraid to be known as a regular at any fast food place because what is that signaling about myself? I try to
Join the
avoid that.
join the dark side, Dr. Adair. It's the rewards are
Hmm.
financial on this one.
Okay, okay. Speaking of dark side, since you said that you were not that attuned to Star Wars speak, I wanted to give you some of the language so you can fit in with the crowds a little bit better.
Okay, good.
So first, raise your right hand, like so.
Okay.
Thumb out.
Thumb out.
Now a gap between your index finger and middle finger,
Yeah.
and repeat after me.
No, this is Star Trek. Nice try. Nice try.
Oh, I'm not done.
Nice try. Dr. Adair's trying to get me jumped at a Star Wars convention. This is gonna shit that's gonna get me beat up.
I
Hey,
was
let's do
hardly
it.
done
Come
though.
on. Come on, let's do it.
All right. By the Lords of Cobalt,
By the Lords of Cobalt,
I gotta catch 'em all.
I gotta catch them all. Epic. I'm gonna be nuked from orbit. Amazing.
You were
And come on, you know I like Pokemon. Like I'm a Pokemon fan. Like I would have recognized the last bit, even if I hadn't recognized it up till that point.
yeah. At the very least, I figured, okay, let's see what you can get you in trouble with Star Wars, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, and anime fans.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sure you could. I don't know. I mean, anime fans tend to be pretty rabid, but Star Wars fans are pretty rabid too. I would like to let everybody know that we've got three calls on the line. They're all fun calls, but I will say that we do not have any theists. And so if you're a theist out there, theists generally have priority on this kind of thing. So if you want to pose your skepticism about evolutionary theory or the shape of the earth, or propose that you've got really good proof for your specific religion, call in. We'd love to hear it. You get bumped basically to the front of the line. So if that's something you're interested in, shoot us a call. Again, the number's on the screen. But in the meantime, Dr. Drew, you got any of these that's like really popping out to you?
Well, let's see here. The first one here is the most in your wheelhouse, and the last one that we have is also in the evolutionary section. So, oh, that looks like they just dropped. All
Yeah.
right, well, so I think let's start with your strong point, or at least of these two, what would be the strong one for you?
I mean, strong-ish. I can certainly, it depends on the question, but I can probably weasel my way through this question. But let's do it. We got
Yeah.
Victor, pronouns he, him from Bulgaria. Victor says that he's having a hard time understanding abiogenesis. And full disclosure, abiogenesis is a little bit before the type of stuff that I study, but I think I can at least offer a little bit of perspective. So, Victor, how about you tell us a little bit about your question and I can do my best. How about that?
Hi there, guys. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you too. Hear you.
Yeah, I also wanted to add, I'm here to ask about abiogenesis and also punctuated equilibrium, but one came after the other. So we'll go there soon.
All right.
from my
I like
understanding-
punctuated equilibrium better though, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's where I'm calling. Okay, so about abiogenesis. I honestly didn't do a lot of reading about it, but I believe I have the basic understanding. So this is the hypothesis that modern life started came up by natural processes, by combining non-living matter into prebiotic synthesis, or how it was, organic molecules. After that came together into strings of polymers, and after that they formed protocellular organisms. And then it became like Luca, the last common ancestor we have. And I'm having a little bit of trouble because I did a little bit of reading that we Pasteur managed to disprove abiogenesis, or at least some version of it. And I'm just curious. What's the modern understanding of it, and how do we actually know that this process managed to occur during ancient times? And do we have some type of archaeological evidence? Do we have some type of DNA evidence before Luca, and etc.?
Yeah. So there are a couple of ways we can talk about this. I mean, abiogenesis is an interesting topic, right? It's right on the cusp of where chemistry becomes biology. And you correctly defined it by outlining this idea as concerning the origination of living matter from non-living matter, from chemical processes. And that sounds like a really easy step, but as I've talked about on this show before, what actually counts as living matter, like what counts as alive, is actually a lot trickier than we might think. For instance, viruses are the go-to example for something that is like, it has some of the characteristics of living things, but not all. Like viruses are relatively motile, but they can't reproduce on their own. They require a host cell to actually do it, but they do have the equipment to reproduce. Once they have a host cell present, they inject their genetic material into the host, and the host creates more of these viruses, and they continue to spread themselves around. So they have a couple of the characteristics, but not everything. So when we're talking about the origin of life, we tend to be talking about the origin of life as we know it, of something that checks all of the boxes for something that we would consider to be a living thing. There are a couple of hypotheses around this as to the where and the when and the how, and essentially, I guess, the why. The when is generally pulled from two different sources. So we have stromatolites, which are essentially fossilized bacterial mats that are dated to about 3.8-ish billion years ago, very, very long time ago, suggesting that life began on Earth very shortly after it formed, like after it was a solid ball. I mean, the Hadean ends and life starts like very shortly after that, because the origin of the Earth is like the age of the Earth is generally thought to be about 4.5 billion years. So less than a billion years later, you have life. Life has been around for much longer than it hasn't been, but it stays relatively simple for a long time. And this is corroborated as a date by the date that we get from molecular clocks. So the way that a molecular clock works is you take a general mutation rate and you take two organisms that are either quite similar or quite disparate from one another, and you count up the differences that they have in generally neutral areas that are not subject to selection. And taking that known mutation rate and the differences that exist, you look at how long it would have taken to get there. And molecular clock dates for at least some of our more recent examinations of this, thanks to newly sequenced genomes, suggests about that 3.8 to 4.1-ish billion years ago. So that's sort of your when. The where, two general hypotheses exist. There is the warm little pond hypothesis, which suggests that life began in warm little ponds, generally on the surface of the Earth, that are subject to the radiation and the light and the heat from the sun, which helps sort of jumpstart some of these processes to get your biomolecules necessary for life. and the organization for that, right? Like if you're in a warm little pond, you could have this wet-dry cycling, which helps RNA assemble itself and blah, blah, blah. And then the other one is the hydrothermal vent idea, which is that from, I can't remember, I think it's, do you remember, Dr. Adair, is it black or white smokers that we think life originated? But some of these hydrothermal vents, they're black smokers and white smokers. One of them is relatively hostile, one of them isn't. And in these black smokers today, you get a lot of the materials just geochemically that are necessary for life, and also micelles can form themselves in these areas, which would give you your cellular membrane and start to kind of wall off the, quote, insides of the cell from what would be the outsides of the cell, and allow the origination of things like homeostasis. Which one is favored right now? I don't know. The last time I looked into this a couple of weeks ago seemed to suggest that hydrothermal vents was still the more popular idea of the two. And then there's the how. And the how for the origin of life is dependent on first of all, which model you like. Like there's the metabolism first hypothesis, there's RNA world hypothesis. And for a while, there were some hypotheses for other aspects of like which biomolecules might have originated first, even DNA, way back when, but those are relatively non-popular now. But since we've been looking into this, we've come to kind of discover and run some pretty interesting experiments and studies. So I think I brought this up last time, but we found most of the necessary amino acids in like space rocks, which is kind of crazy in and of itself. You get a lot of the necessary amino acids just from rocks that are floating around in space. Like I said, with the hydrothermal vents, you can get micelles for cellular membranes, your fats, your lipid bilayer from pretty much just basic geochemical processes when these lipids are present, and they tend to be in these black smokers. Proteins, interestingly enough, there was a paper just 2 months ago, I think, on like the longest sort of self-assembly that we've seen so far. I think it was 45 amino acids long, which is kind of insane in and of itself. And then, sugars, carbohydrates are all over the place. So it seems like we have, for abiogenesis right now, the state of things. And again, I say this as somebody who's like very casually interested in the topic. This is not my forte. So forgive me if I'm oversimplifying or if any of my information is out of date. But my understanding is that we have several hypotheses, several models that work pretty dang well to explain the origin of life, or at least the origin of various aspects necessary for life. And we're trying to figure out how each of these individual studies, experiments, and observations fit together to create a synthesis that actually does explain it. Right. So I don't think we're at a point right now where there's anything in the origin of life question that we are like completely clueless on. Like from chirality to self-assembly, we have some idea, but we almost have an embarrassment of riches, I think, for as far as hypotheses and models go. It's difficult to know which one is the one to explain each of our biomolecules and indeed how they synthesize together to get the first life, which was almost certainly far simpler than any living organism alive today. So does that sound okay for like a quick primer?
That's actually more than okay. That's quite a lot of information. I will need to check about this later. But about the surface level theory that you mentioned, that life started in these shallow warm pools in the surface of the Earth. As far as I understand, the Earth in its beginning was quite irradiated and hot because of the sun's radiation. Doesn't the radiation actually prevent the forming of biological compounds, because it's quite harmful for us?
So last I checked on this, again, it's been a little bit. I watched a video a couple of weeks ago by, I think his name's Phil the Neutrophil, biochem guy here on YouTube. He did this awesome primer on abiogenesis and this sort of current state of things. And if memory serves, he talked a little bit about the radiation and the warm little pond, because that was for a long time what made warm little pond dead on arrival. They were just like, you can't get life on these warm little ponds because the sun at that time, there's virtually no atmosphere, or at least very limited atmospheric protection from UV radiation. anything that even started to form would just get blasted to bits and killed immediately because of the radiation from the sun. Sun's a deadly laser, et cetera, et cetera. But I remember there being there was some experiment that was done. Forgive me for like butchering this because I don't know the details of it, or at least I don't remember them. There was an experiment done that seemed to suggest that radiation, might not be a bug, it might be a feature for the origination of life. Almost like the Jeremy England style law of thermodynamics, entropy increasing, blah, 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 might also be a bug or a feature rather than a bug in the origination of life, that you sort of roundabout increase entropy by getting life. It's all a little bit heady, but I can at least recommend this video to you so you can see, because he does a really great breakdown of the radiation stuff. I just don't unfortunately remember it very well. Let me let you know. All right, hold on. Fill the neutrophil? Yeah, I'm going to put the link in the chat.
Thank you.
1 second. For anybody who's interested too. Anyways, that's sort of the bird's eye view. Go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Adair.
Yeah, and I will try to contribute something to this, but in many ways, coming in with the physics thing is much like I can show you like the equation for like how rockets push things, but that does not let you know how to build a rocket. I leave that to the engineers who know what they're talking about, doing the actual rocket science. Same thing with the biologists and chemists. But from the 1,000-mile view of how it works physically, there is a branch of physics known as non-equilibrium thermodynamics. And I bring this up because often creationists will say that like life breaks the second law of thermodynamics, but the reality is when you have any sort of dissipation of energy, if you have different levels of energy in two spots, you have an energy flow, and that flow of energy is basically where you can get any sort of work done. And a lot of work has gone into exploring these non-equilibrium states, and that life could actually naturally arise just from having different concentrations of energy. The flow of energy actually naturally produces complexity to grow rather than simplicity to be the order of the way of things. So this, of course, doesn't tell us exactly how life originated. It does not tell us the chemical pathways, but the physics basically says we should actually expect things to get complex due to these difference in energy concentrations.
I'll add really quick that while I was finding the video, I also just looked up warm little pond radiation to try to jog my memory. And it looks like the experiment that I was talking about, or the study that I was remembering, was the role that radiation actually plays in converting compounds like urea into nucleobases. So it is potentially a feature. There's still aspects of the radiation that I think are potentially difficult for little tiny critters to overcome. But it looks like this isn't quite as unworkable a model as once was thought. So it's still viable, I think.
You mentioned the second law of thermodynamics, that life can evolve because there's no input of energy or things like that. I always found this creationist argument quite strange, because like the Earth is not a closed system. All the energy we have comes from the sun, and I always thought that's quite interesting to think about.
It would not be the first time. It would not be the first time a creationist has used a bad argument to try to debunk evolution or abiogenesis. I think at this point, Answers in Genesis even has like they have a page that's like arguments you shouldn't use, and I'm fairly certain that the second law of thermodynamics is on that list now, has a worthy spot on that list.
And in Genesis, there are at least semi, how to say that, semi-honest about some of the more obvious mistakes in their ideology. They can at least take credit for that.
Yeah,
okay,
I think you can give them credit for some things, but they're also very stalwart on other things. Like there's some stuff that seem to be like ideological, like load-bearing ideas that they will not, for any reason, move on. or at least their official stance won't move on, that I think is going to get them into trouble here soon. But anyways, did that answer your question okay? You feeling a little better? Watch that video I linked.
Yeah.
It's quite helpful.
Yeah, I checked the link. Yeah, it's already in the chat.
Sweet.
Okay, that was mostly everything about abiogenesis. I was also wanted to ask about didn't the oxygen that was dissolved into the primary ooze affect the synthesis of life, but I think Forrest already answered this question in one of his earliest videos.
That sounds right. That sounds like something
Yes,
Forrest
I'm going
would do.
to check that later.
Do it and call back if you have any more questions, my friend. We'll try to answer.
Definitely. Okay, we are already answered. Do we have time about the other question, or I already took?
No, shoot. If it's punctuated equilibrium, I think I can probably answer relatively quickly. So by all means.
Yes, about the punctuated equilibrium. Okay, as far as I understand, evolution is inheritance of. Let me just figure out how to say it.
Yeah.
It's inheriting genes from your parents that help them reproduce and to aid to your own reproduction. Did I say that the right way?
Yeah, sure. I'll just say for the sake of clarity, just for the sake of anybody listening too, generally in a textbook, you'll see evolution described as a change in the allelic frequency of populations over time. So basically, characteristics fluctuate in response to the environment. Natural variation is selected upon by or rather, I should say, filtered by the location in which organisms live, and the characteristics which are beneficial to them in that environment, which help them get an edge on other critters, both within their specific population or even competing with other individuals or species. It's what allows them to have an edge, eat more food, get bigger, have more kids, and then pass that material on to their own offspring. And over time, because some characteristics are favored over others, you will see the population sort of skew towards that new phenotype, those new characteristics.
Yes, everything happens gradually over the span of many thousands of generations. And
yep, it can happen fast too.
Yes, that's what I wanted to talk about. How is that actually viable? I mean, isn't big changes way too big of a risk? Isn't this more likely lead to the extinction of this species, or how exactly? Isn't that way too big of a chance?
So the variation that populations have is provided by mutation, one of the four primary mechanisms of evolution. Mutation is intrinsic to reproduction, especially sexual reproduction, and what ends up happening is you get alterations on the original genotype of the parent. Recombination is also playing a role, so the kids are going to be a little bit different. This variation is a part of the gene pool of that individual population. And those characteristics are either going to stick around because they're beneficial, or they're going to stick around because of genetic drift. Maybe they don't do anything and they're not selected for or against. And so they sort of just fluctuate back and forth in the population over time randomly. Again, that's genetic drift, one of the mechanisms that is thought to be responsible for a lot of different characteristics that don't seem to provide a really obvious fitness benefit. And then there are characteristics that are detrimental. I mean, obviously, if you're born, without kidneys or something like that, without modern medicine, if you're living in the wild, that's going to be detrimental to you as an individual because you're not going to be able to survive with that. That's going to be a lethal mutation. You will die before you reach reproductive age, and that characteristic will not be passed on. So mutations can either be positive, they can be negative, or they can be neutral. And whether they're positive, negative, or neutral is entirely subject to the context, right? Like it is contextually decided. What's good in one environment is necessarily going to be bad in another, right? Long hair in the desert is bad, but long hair in the Arctic is good, theoretically. So punctuated equilibrium operates on this idea that when you have suddenly many roles, ecological roles or jobs in the environment that suddenly open up due to mass extinction, usually you see punctuated equilibrium or adaptive radiation, as it's sometimes called, for ecological communities, happen after like, volcanic eruptions or asteroid impacts or just dramatic climate change that happens too quickly for organisms to adapt, and the hardiest will survive. And then they will suddenly have all of these different jobs that they could potentially adapt into. So at this point, you can ask the question, okay, how do you actually get that fast change into these new niches? And that boils down to selection upon larger scale variations that are the result of mutations. So some mutations are going to change something really little, right? And other mutations have dramatic influence on phenotypic change or on the phenotype or physical characteristics of an organism. So an example that I really love to point out is that a couple of years ago in like 2019, I think 2018, 2019, researchers were really curious as to, I mean, they're always curious about this, but at this point in time, they were specifically looking at the human brain size compared to other critters. Because there's a gene called RGAP11A that all primates have, and it's thought to be related to the fact that all primates have brains that are bigger than necessary for a mammal of our size. Humans have an additional copy of RGAP11A. We call it RGAP11B, and it's experienced a couple of different point mutations or single base pair changes to it in addition to being duplicated. That, in and of itself, caused our brains to essentially double the amount of neuroprogenitor cells. I don't think it's the radial glial cells. I think that's the Neanderthal one. But it basically increased the size and folding of our brain, the surface area of the surface of our brain, which is really important for cognitive function in critters like humans. So researchers were like, that's crazy, right? I mean, that's one mutation to duplicate the gene, and then like maybe another or two to adapt RGAP11A's copy and neofunctionalize it into doing something else. So they were like, I wonder if this will work in other critters. And so they took the human version of RGAP11B and they just stuck it into a marmoset. And the marmoset's brain took on a phenotype that was very similar to a human brain, right? It had all of these little gyrations and folds in it that are not typical for marmosets who are normally pretty smooth-brained. So that's a pretty big change from a couple of very little mutations. That would be something that punctuated equilibrium, that would show up in the fossil record, at least as punctuated equilibrium, if it were to happen where and when an ecological niche was available to an organism and provided it a select advantage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's the same as regular mutation that leads to beneficial adaptation to the environment, but on a bigger scale.
Yes, but a lot of times, right, like a mutation can do small things like change the color, like the pelage of an organism's fur, or they can do really big things, right? Like there's a series of mutations that can essentially give you a human-looking pelvis from like a chimp-like pelvis, or more accurately, like a Rudopithecus Miocene ape-style pelvis. And what's really cool about it is that the mutations impact the orientation of the growth plate. So your hip bones are kind of like these big plates that run front to back, right? And so when they're growing, they start, small, and they grow short and wide and develop into your ilia or the bones of your hip. But there's this common question of like, okay, but that's the mutation for the skeletal structure. How do you get the muscles and the tendons and the cardiovascular system, the circulatory system rather, to change with it? And the answer is a lot of times when you have these changes upstream, they induce changes downstream. So because the way that this growth plate grew, instead of being tall and thin like a chimp growth plate, it was short and wide like a human growth plate, just because a mutation knocks it essentially on its side. And because it grows like this, the musculature that grows around it essentially pulls it into this front to back position that's the human orientation. So these things induce one another, and you end up with a massive, large scale change in the physical, in the anatomy of the critter from relatively small changes. But something like that might not necessarily be selected for if all is well. So gradualism and punctuated equilibrium kind of work together in tandem to change populations of organisms over time. You're not going to see punctuated equilibrium unless there's a niche for organisms to actually quickly evolve into.
So isn't it technically the same as what happened in the X-Men universe? Sorry, it sounds stupid. But
No, it's
in
all right.
many science fiction fictions, they explain this sudden gain of powers as a rapid evolution. Is it something like this technically possible, or is I'm not talking about like a laser from the eyes or stuff like that. Just for example, I know there's people who have like bone density that's 5 times uh, stronger than a regular human, or people whose muscle tissue is some like a little bit different, and that's helped them gain a lot more muscle mass. Isn't this the same, or like is this just something completely different?
I mean, I think that it is entirely feasible to suggest that if the mutation that doubles your muscles or increases your bone density to the extent that like you're not breaking bones as easily, if that mutation had showed up in a population of people 200,000 years ago, I would wager that that would very quickly proliferate within that population because not breaking bones as easily is a super big benefit to have, right? If you're a hunter gatherer and you're having to like get up close and personal with your prey. But as far as I know, both of those mutations are in part the result of the fact that there's billions of people on this planet. So you're basically running far, far, far more, trials of generating these cool mutations because there's just so many people. And so this mutation is relatively new, and we live in an era with modern medicine. So it's going to be really hard for something to move to fixation at a global population scale, even if it's just unambiguously beneficial like that. Because right now, dying of a broken leg is relatively uncommon. But I can imagine that if that had shown up a lot earlier, that we would all be reaping the benefits today.
Uh, but is it possible, for example, to use this type of mutations to create some type of vaccines, for example? Like, I think in China there was like a person who is, that's like information from the top of my head. I'm not completely sure it was real, but there was like some news about a man who was like immune to AIDS or something like that because of this type of mutation. But I'm not sure. Is it possible
I've heard. I have heard
is
of
it
that too. Yeah, I've heard of that too. And like, I mean, I can imagine that that would be I mean, that's wonderful. That's phenomenal. I hope that that guy is donating a lot of blood so that we can kind of suss out what it is that gives him an advantage. It's probably like as simple as like a binding site blocking thing, if I had to totally guess. But again, HIV and AIDS, that's not a death sentence anymore either. So like that's unambiguously beneficial, but you can just
Quick thing
survive.
though, the HIV patient I think we're talking about here from China wasn't a person who had natural immunity. I think there's actually a human experiment with CRISPR to give them
I
immunity
see.
to the HIV virus, and that was questionably ethical because jumping to human testing so quickly for something that can be treated relatively easily. It's not like, hey, this is a last ditch effort. This is more like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if? And you would generally not do that immediately with humans. You don't just say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we just poke at them and see what happens? I just remember this case from several years ago, and
I didn't know
I
that.
think also that scientist who worked on that has disappeared since then. So there's a lot of sketchy stuff going on.
Disappeared. Where did they go?
I mean, in China, if you upset the central government, you might have a talking to, and you go out of public view for a while. Even billionaires like Jack Ma disappeared for a few weeks after he made some critical comments about the monetary policy of China, and then he was just gone for a while. And billionaires don't just disappear, so yeah, message received.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah,
Holy.
let's hope he's in some kind of underground laboratory and he's working on something beneficial and not like the next umbrella T virus.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Well, listen, Victor, this has been wonderful. We do have a lot of people still waiting, so did that
Mhm.
hopefully answer your question a little bit? I know we were kind of just I was just kind of throwing
Yeah,
examples and stuff, but
you completely answered my questions. Just one last thing, that's literally just one sentence for you. Do you believe that cryptozoology someday can actually be a credible science?
the problem with cryptozoology being a credible science is the second that you find out an animal that we previously didn't appreciate existing actually does exist, it's no longer crypto, right? It becomes just regular zoology. So, the okapi, classic example, is an animal that was known by local people groups, but unknown to Western science. And people didn't really think that it was something that existed. And then it's like, oh, they go out, the Westerners see it, and they're like, aha, it does exist. Again, not to mention the fact that people who lived there knew that it existed, and they were like, no, this thing really does exist. But for the sake of discussing it in a Western context, right? Like, we found out that it existed. And so studying the okapi is no longer cryptozoological because it's just zoological. You know what I mean? So I think I love cryptozoology. I think it's a blast. And there are cases that are legit over the past 100 years where we found out that animals that we didn't think existed do exist, which is amazing and awesome. And I hope that happens. I would love it if that happened for every cryptid because I think cryptids are fun. The problem is a lot of the types of cryptids that are currently unknown to science, I imagine at this point we would have pretty good support for. And some of them have been outright like I would say insofar something can be debunked, right? So Nessie, my beloved, the Loch Ness monster, they did like a really cool eDNA test where they took 1 billion samples of water from Loch Ness, and then they searched them for environmental DNA to see if they found anything aberrant. And what they discovered is that there are either a few very large or many very small eels living in Loch Ness. And so maybe that explains some of the Loch Ness monster sighting. A big long neck of something slithering, sort of under your boat. It kind of does make sense. But they did not find inexplicable marine reptile DNA, which, given we're all shedding DNA all the time, you would think that they would have gotten a trace of, which sucks. Makes me sad.
Yeah, that's quite unfortunate.
Science is a bummer
Okay,
sometimes.
I think that was, yeah. Well, I think that's also one more thing. I'm sorry. It's not a question. It's a question, but not about this topic. Did you actually receive the drawing I sent you like a few months ago? We were talking about this on the previous call, and after that, I was quite unsure. Did you actually manage to receive it? Because I sent it as a response to your response on the email, so I think it got quite like
Victor, I am like 2 months behind on my email right now. My grind set is unbelievable right now. I get up and I work in the morning on my dissertation, and in the afternoon I edit, and then I eat dinner, and if I have this, I do this, and then in the evenings I edit again, and then I go to bed. I am so busy right now. It's insane because I'm trying to finish my dissertation. So I'm very sorry for not responding. I will respond.
No, it's completely fine. It's completely fine.
I probably did get
so
it. I'm behind on answering my emails right now.
If you don't mind, I can send it again on the clean email, so you don't have to go through your responses.
That would be lovely.
That was the last question.
Sure thing, man.
Thank you once again for your time, for your answers, Erika. Thanks you to Dr. Adair. Thank you for your explanation about the abiogenesis, the equilibrium, and the mutations. It was really interesting.
Hey, take care, man. It's our pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I do have to push back on one thing, though, Erika.
Push back.
You could still keep a cryptozoological thing crypto after you discover it. Once you discover, for example, gorillas are really big into Bitcoin mining.
So, yeah, right. So it would be zoology if you found out they were interested in crypto. Then it would become cryptozoology. I see.
There you go.
That's fair enough. It's fair enough. But it takes on a new meaning,
Yeah. But
What?
But then at least the board ate, Yacht Club can be slightly more real.
I will never forgive the Bored Ape Yacht Club or NFTs in general for the damage that they did for ape and monkey enjoyers on the internet. Those things were so hideous. I don't know. I guess it makes me kind of like I get some Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude?
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude. I get some Schadenfreude knowing how much money some of these guys lost. You know, they're spending just like generational wealth on like a dog shit drawing of a monkey. But you know,
Worse than a dog shit drawing, a dog shit computer generated drawing, procedurally generated drawing.
True. It's not, not even made by people. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I am thinking 10/6 for this next call. What do you think?
I don't see a 6. I see a 10 and a we're looking at different numbers, but yeah, 10 and 7 going by what numbers are there. I agree with that.
Which one do you think?
7 has been waiting the longest of the two.
All right, let's do it. We got, and I'm so sorry to our atheist and agnostic callers, please continue to hang out. We will try to get to all of our calls, but theists do take priority. So we're going to start with Bran, pronouns he, him, from Canada. He's a theist, and he's calling to tell us what he believed about God during a psychotic episode, which is very interesting. Also, David from the UK, I know you're listening because you're waiting for us. Wait, I do want to talk to you about your call as well. But in the meantime, Bran, welcome. Can you hear us?
Hi, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Superb, we can. Yeah, tell us a little bit about your query here.
Well, I just want to kind of explain my experience and what I believe currently, because I wasn't raised religiously. I wasn't really brought up in a religion. And then I went into a Catholic school just because that was the best nearby school to where my family lived. And they would talk about God, and I thought, well, this stuff sounds stupid. So I decided I didn't believe in God when I was pretty young. But then I started having like some kind of existential crisis issues as a teenager. And I read some terrible books like Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code and stuff. And then I kind of decided that maybe like God is like revealing himself in like hidden like symbols or patterns or something. And maybe this is like some kind of puzzle that like God's just like put Easter eggs. So it looks like God's not real. But actually there's like little Easter eggs buried everywhere, and you have to like find them and discover these like little like hidden secret signs of God's existence. So then, I started thinking about that, and I started like praying to God for a while. But then I read like Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion. I was like, yeah, no, this sounds pretty good. Yeah, I'm probably just being stupid. So then I was like an atheist for a long time. But then like during COVID, my mental health just started to really break down. And I became like, I started to just completely lose touch of reality. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So I started thinking that not only that there's like little Easter eggs about God's existence, I thought that like God was putting little Easter eggs out there for me specifically, that God was communicating with me in like little ways, like just at certain times he would give me little messages. So, and I thought it had something to do with the number 42, because 42 was the answer to life, the universe, and everything in Douglas Adams.
That's
so
true.
I thought, well, there's like little coincidences happening, and they would happen when at 42 minutes past the hour. So I would get really freaked out every hour at 42 minutes past the hour. So I thought, this is the time when God is like revealing secrets to me. And then I started getting really freaked out. I started thinking, like, this is like a test, and I have to figure out what these signs mean. Otherwise God is going to send me to hell.
Right.
And I basically had like a complete nervous breakdown. I was absolutely beside myself. And I thought everything I did, I thought there were little signs. And like, I would be playing a video game, and I would think that there were signs in the video game, and that everything that happened at 42 minutes past the hour was meaningful. Yeah.
So your pattern seeking. Well, okay. I want to hear how this ends. But Dr. Adair, do you have any thoughts thus far?
My first thought is, based on the background you're creating your brand, that you were undergoing various sorts of mental stress, and there is a fair bit of science out there that actually indicates when you are stressed, you are actually more likely to seek and find patterns in completely random things. This is actually a well-studied phenomena of what increases the rate of what's called apophenia, the fancy word for seeing patterns which aren't there. You might have heard of pareidolia, literally seeing things in patterns visually, but the more general thing is apophenia. And that is my first thought of what might be going on here. You were describing cases where you were just really stressed and you're trying to find some way of control. And a lot of the psychological studies out there are saying, yes, exactly. When you are stressed and you're looking for control, you search for those patterns so you have something to cling on to, whether that thing is there or not. So I'm curious what you think about that kind of science out there.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense, but like I was really reluctant. Like I dreaded finding these things. So I thought, you know, I thought like I'm in some kind of weird test, and I was just like horrified about like failing this test, or like what the science would mean if there's some kind of warning. But I got on medication.
Okay.
I got put on antipsychotic medication, and the intrusive thoughts, like constantly thinking about like hidden signs in the number 42, that kind of went away. But I still, the way I think about reality, like I would say I'm a complete agnostic now. So I don't know what happens when I die. I don't know if I'm going to be reincarnated into something else, or if I'm going to be finding myself in some other world or realm, or whether consciousness is just going to stop forever. I would say it's about probability 1/3 for each of those. What do you think about that?
Well, first off, I am glad that you have also been able to find help in these matters. And so just public service announcement, if you, to the audience, if you are struggling physically, mentally, reaching out to people, reaching out to professionals, I strongly advise everyone, please find and get the help that you need, because we all need help from time to time. I just came back from the doctor a few hours ago myself because I needed help with something. So please do that. For your particular case, it's also interesting that I do also have family that have had issues of intrusive thoughts and occasionally needing medicine to help that. So I have at least some familiarity with that, not like directly happening to me, but indirectly with people I know and care about. And yeah, it's amazing to see just what the brain is, what the brain does, and how we can at least occasionally make things a little bit better with modern medicine, among other methods. So as for what happens when we die, I'm a physicalist. I think consciousness is ultimately a byproduct of the brain, in the same sort of way a computer program is a byproduct of a functioning computer. Smash the computer, there's no program running. Smash my brain, there's no consciousness running. That's at least my best determination from what the evidence points to, and everything else about there being a supernatural aspect that can somehow either survive or be reimplanted. I don't see any evidence for that. If you want to go simulation hypothesis, I don't see any reason to buy that. As far as I can tell, this is the only life we got, and this is the only life that we can try to make better for ourselves. I'm not waiting for the next one because this is the only one I see that's available.
Yeah, I get that. It's exactly what you are pointing towards with the simulation hypothesis. It doesn't have to be a literal computer simulation. Like you might think that computer simulation of consciousness is impossible or something, or whatever. It's just the idea that this reality is in some way deceptive. That things are not what they seem. That that there's a secret that we're not really supposed to know. That's this disguising what's really going on.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't have any reason to think that. And it all becomes weirder if you actually think there are signals being given to you specifically to let you know what's going on, because of the whole point of it being secret, giving you signs that the secret is out there and telling you what the secret is kind of defeats the point. If I want to, have a clandestine operation, what I don't do is leave little hints to the US government about what my clandestine operations are, just to see if they're clever enough to figure out what my idea is, because it ultimately defeats what I'm trying to do if they do figure out what my little notes mean. It's, at the very least, I think if the universe is a simulation, it's probably being run by someone slightly smarter than the Riddler from the Batman comics.
Yeah, that makes sense. But you could consider that like we might be just like little mice in a maze, right? That we're being experimented on, and just like the mouse doesn't know why he's in a maze, right? But the mouse doesn't know that he's part of a science experiment and that we're learning about like mouse behavior. He's just like, okay, I'm here in a maze and I'm like finding cheese or whatever. What?
I mean, I think first of all, I think from what I caught, what both of you discussed about the nature of like, if this is some large secret, how is it that you're picking up on all of these signals, right? It seems like kind of a poor masquerade if it's this easy to sort of tease apart. But I also think human brains are just remarkable at finding patterns. I mean, we find patterns where there are none all the time. I think that there have been people since the dawn of time, and also organizations since the dawn of time, who have felt like there's sort of, the allegory of the cave, right, or the Gnostics or whatever, that there's some great truth that's just beyond our reach, and if we could just figure it out, then everything will make sense. But I think that I don't know, there's a truth to the fact that people try to find that, right? Like there's a truth to the fact that we want that to be the case. But isn't it also true that it could be that we're finding patterns where there are none, and that everything kind of is actually as it seems, and it really is that simple, right? For all of its chaos and for all of its nonsensical nature, right? Like it really is that simple. And at that point, you have to decide, okay, how do you tease out the difference? And I think what Dr. Adair was getting at earlier about like, okay, well, you weigh all of your observations, and if the overwhelming majority of it seems to favor, shit just happens, right? Like, and I mean that in a positive way, right? Like it's just life is happening to us and we're reacting, and it's sort of business as usual. Then I think that you're fine to take that route. And if it turns out that it's all a big experiment and you're, rat in a maze, so be it. It is what it is.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's totally possible. It's totally possible that this is all it is. This is all there is, and it's just physical stuff, and it's just shit happening. Yeah, that's totally possible.
I think too, like, I'm a very neurotic person, and especially when I was younger and when I was religious as well, I found myself searching for signs and patterns in places, like, oh, is this God trying to speak to me? This is a message, And then even when I left religion, sometimes I still find myself being like, okay, is this a sign from the universe? And I don't know. I think it's really easy to see a plan where there is none because people are so good at working it out, right? Like it feels like there's a plan because everything works out, but everything works out because we force it to, right? Like we make it work out. We figure it out and make it work for our best interests insofar as we can. You know what I mean? I think that if it is a grand conspiracy and this is a big test, then if you don't figure it out, you're being sent to hell. It was not a test you were meant to pass in the first place. And you might as well just enjoy life and do the best you can with what you got. I mean, I think if you see a big actual message in the sky, we can have a conversation then. But the ultimate arbiter of truth in the universe speaking to us through small signs and riddles, that it strikes me as unlikely. But that's just my opinion.
That makes total sense. Can I ask like a little question about the origin of life based on the previous caller?
I will do my best to answer it. I'm not a biochemist, but I will try. So shoot. So
like the ribosome is like made of like protein, right? And it's necessary to make proteins. Like the ribosome like basically translates RNA into protein, right? Is that right?
Yes, the tRNAs are what help you. It sort of runs through like a ticket taker. Your mRNA comes into the cytoplasm, your tRNA translates it to your amino acids and strung together like little pearls on a string. That's what gets you your protein.
So it's like it seems like you need a ribosome to make a ribosome. So it seems like kind of like another chicken and the egg thing.
I am pulling up a paper for you on this exact topic. I was kind of talking about this earlier, but again, it's been a minute since I've looked at the paper. It was just from earlier this year. A small polymerase ribozyme that can synthesize itself and its complementary strand. This is for RNA. You're asking about proteins, though. Hold on. Hold on. Dr. Adair, can you talk about this for just a second while I try to find the paper that I'm looking for so you're not just hearing me like hum and haw and trying to find my paper?
Well, the problem is what you're discussing is well outside my knowledge base. I mean, I've heard of ribosomes, but when it comes to the molecular biology, I can barely spell RNA. My very, very basic understanding, though, of what the most primitive form of life is that you didn't have anything as complex as the modern ribosome, and you would have had much more primitive things that could basically move around, copy, and assemble proteins without it necessarily being the ribosome itself. But I am spitballing from extremely minimal knowledge on the part of a physicist who does not study anything close to this sort of stuff. So I'm being cautious about anything I claim here. Yeah. Biology is not my strong suit, which is a bit unfortunate considering I am an example of biology. You'd think I would know myself better, but all I know is biological stuff is squishy.
I got it for you. The short tale of the origin of proteins and ribosome evolution. I'm going to stick this in the chat for you, Bran, so that you can take a look at it. And it essentially argues that peptides are likely to have co-evolved with ancestral forms of RNA. The ribosome is the most evident product of this coevolution process, a sophisticated nanomachine that performs the synthesis of proteins codified in the genomes. In this general review, we explore the evolution of proteins from their peptide origins to their folding and regulation based on the example of superoxide dismutase, a key enzyme in the oxygen metabolism on modern Earth. So this is like a primary review that will hopefully be helpful since I'm not really an origin of life person. I'm sticking it in the chat now, and you can check that out, as well as Peptide Synthesis at the Origin of Life by Machowska and Moran, which argues that organocatalysis drives the emergence of peptide biochemistry. So essentially, and I'm going to hopefully not butcher this in the way that I dumb it down. It's kind of like arguing. There we go. Okay, it's kind of like arguing like how do you get a car without a car factory? Like how could you possibly get cars if you need a car factory to make the first car? And it's like, well, car factories didn't come de novo out of nothing. There are precursors to both cars and car factories. There were carts and then cart factories, and then there was a wheel and a wheel factory, which was essentially just a group of people standing in a line chiseling wheels out of, wood and stone and things like that. Both of these papers argued that the modern ribosome protein relationship has precursors in peptides and through organocatalysis. Now, I don't know the details past that, but I think that if you're interested in this, it's certainly worth looking at, because even a brief Google search suggests to me that it's not like we're sitting with our hands up and saying we have no idea. How do you get, this is a chicken and egg problem that's completely unsolved. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Chill. Check it out, and let me call back when we have a biochemist on who can answer that question a little bit better. I think it's a fair question, but it seems to me, just reading the abstracts of those two papers, that there are two pretty feasible models, and those are both pretty recent. One's 2020 and one's 2022. So those should include a nice history of like, here's when we figured this out, and here's the gaps that still exist in our knowledge. Like here's what we're still trying to suss out, et cetera, et cetera. Cool.
That's cool, and that's totally fair. That's really interesting. Hey, thanks for hearing my call.
You got it, dude. Take care, man.
Hey, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
All right. Oh my God, it's Abiogenesis Day. All right, let's take our next theist caller, and I guess during the interim, I'll have to bone up, if you will, on my abio stuff.
Mm-mm.
In the meantime, we got David from the UK, pronouns he, him, and he's a theist. And he says, this is what the call screen says. So, David, you'll have to elaborate for us a little bit here. God made us that way as far as environmental structures. So, David, welcome to SkepTalk. Can you hear us okay?
Hello, I can hear you guys very clearly.
Wonderful. All right, tell us a little bit about this question.
Well, it's obvious, God made us that way. It means your arguments about environmental nature and like this animal is made in this environment that makes them through evolution. It's like that's just an excuse, because the reason they survive in the desert like a camel is because God specifically designed it that way. It's just obvious.
This is a really interesting perspective. So do you think in the Garden of Eden, let me probe here for a minute. Do you think that every species is a separate creation?
Of course. Like a video game, you have like different designs.
Yeah, but every species, so like there's no such thing as speciation?
Of course not. The scam.
That's crazy, because like we've observed it in the lab and in the wild. Like,
Yeah,
we've watched
well,
it happen.
Okay, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. I was just saying, like, we've seen this happen. Like, we're not only have we seen it happen, like reproductive isolation evolve in Drosophila in the lab, or we're watching it happen right now with the Encentina salamanders in California, but like, it's happened a lot of times. So I'm struggling. Help me understand.
Right. So what happened is a bunch of scientists looked at graphs on a piece of paper and said, "This is this," as if graphs cannot be made up. Of course, they're made up. They're being paid off by secret societies that want to get rid of the idea of God. Come on. It's like, oh, look at this graph. This graph says, that it's not God. It's a scam.
David, are
and
you
if you don't
trolling?
follow that, then I'm not.
Are
I
you
swear to
trolling?
God. Think about it. I'm not trolling, because think about it. Have scientists ever lied? Have they ever looked at a graph and
Have religious people ever lied?
it? Of course not. Not the real ones.
In that case, not you are one of those always honest, never lie about anything things, David? Never once lied?
Absolutely, don't lie. Well, maybe I was a little kid, but then I repented. Went to church,
You're a liar.
said,
We can't believe you now.
confessed.
Sorry, we can't believe you. We're done. Sorry, I don't talk to liars.
Yeah.
You're not talking
It
to a liar
sucks.
because I'm reborn. I'm no longer the same person. I'm a different person.
So you even lie about your past. I see.
So
That person who did all that bad stuff
like,
before, that wasn't you. That was somebody else. This sounds like exactly what a scammer would say.
So, okay, let me destroy your argument really quickly, easily too. You make this, you say that about religious people, but then you'll say, oh, a transgender person, well, we used to call them Gren, but now it's still here. It's not
you were definitely
trolling.
trolling.
Oh, really? So if you can't, okay, so you don't want to hear my argument because you know I'm right. So instead, you're
dude, I know you're like rolling the best hits. Like you're doing greatest hits here. It actually wouldn't have, I would have been, you had me until you were like, you had me until you did the truth yourself. Because that's like kind of a hood classic.
No. Which part is the troll? Because you don't want to hear my argument because you know it's
dude. The troll part is scientists made up science. That's the part that's troll to me.
Scientists make up graphs on a screen. Yes. Like they said, sugar was healthy for you when it benefited them.
Those graphs on a screen are directly responsible for the technology that you're using to talk to me right now.
Yeah, well, God created those brains to create the person to make those technology, but it can also be deceived.
Right, but those brains were the ones that noticed that speciation happened, like while in individual lifetimes. Like this is like borderline solipsism. This is why I'm saying you're trolling. Because like I don't think this is real. I think you're yanking my chain here, brother.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm clearly, obviously not a troll. But if you don't want to hear my argument because I think I'm a troll, then
I want to hear your argument. But the scientists are all lying isn't an argument because like I'm a scientist,
right? I think they're all lying.
Like
yeah, she did.
Yeah, you said they're all scammers. Like that's a quote from you.
Paid by secret societies.
Yeah, they're all scammers, but specifically the scammers, not all scientists. You misquoted me. You like to do that with the Bible.
So you're saying all scientists are scammers, but not all scammers are liars? I'm really not tracking this very well. David, troll better, please.
It's not a troll.
Yeah, that doesn't fall. Here's what I want to hear. So tell me how you know that speciation is a scam, because there's not a graph involved in that, right? Like that wasn't a graph, that was just observations over decades of people being like, oh, these salamanders used to be able to produce babies with each other, and now they can't anymore. Or like these fruit flies used to be able to produce babies with each other, and now they can't. They're different species. You know what I mean?
I don't even know what you're talking about. See, this is the point. You just gabbish on about random stuff and nobody understands or gets. That's the scam.
What's a species, David?
A species is a species.
Yeah, dude is trolling so hard. I don't know what to say about this. Like, how are we supposed to have a conversation if you don't know the definitions of the things that you're talking about? Like, it's not.
I told you.
It's not possible. A species is a species. A cat is a cat is a cat. How do you tell what it? How do you know that a dog and a cat are different species? Are they?
Because one's a dog, one's a cat. It's obvious.
How do you know?
Anyway,
wait, how do you know?
How do I know?
Wait, how do you know? Yeah.
Because you can just tell.
Yeah, how can you tell?
By looking with the eyes that God created.
Yeah, how? How does that work? Like when you look at a dog and you see it, what do you see that lets you go, oh, that's a dog? Like, what do you see?
You see a dog? Like, your questions don't make sense. Like, when you're a kid,
what does a dog have?
That's a dog, that's a cat.
What does a dog have?
Because a dog it has legs and it has a mouth.
Dude, a cat has both of those.
Right.
So how do you tell the difference?
Because when you're a kid and you learn about animals in nursery, they'll say this is a dog, this is a cat, and that's how you know.
I present you with an animal you've never seen before, and I say this is a dog. You as an adult, what do you say? How do you know if it's a dog or not?
Because when you're a kid, you see pictures and
dude, there's no shot this is real. There's no way. Thank you for calling, David. But if you don't have anything to say,
I want to comment one more thing before you.
Nah, dude, you're about to drop us. I'm dropping him. He's gonna drop a slur.
Yeah,
that was gonna be a slur. I would bet at least $20 on that was gonna be a slur. I mean, dude, you got to be a little more creative with it, because it's like if you're too obvious that you are just like kind of fucking around, then we're gonna know when we're gonna end the call. You got to be a little bit more clever. hide the intentions. But I guess he couldn't do that because he's never lied and he doesn't lie. Shoot.
Yes,
Damn.
exactly.
Bummer.
Though his past self that he popped out of as a butterfly and left the cocoon of his former self behind. So that explains why that past self has nothing to do with obvious troller who trolls.
Yeah, what a waste of time. It's actually crazy that I'm not going to get those minutes of my life back. Unreal.
But fortunately, we got plenty of other people to talk to who I suspect are better.
I agree. Let's take our next theist caller. We have, oh wait,
Ooh, yeah.
I think I know this person. Okay, we got Chemo, pronouns he, him from Florida. He's a theist. Chemo, I remember you. Chemo wants to talk about genetics in the beginning of life. Chemo, I'll do my best, dude. I'll try my best.
Yes, no worries. How are you doing, Erika?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to speak to you again. And I'm sorry, the other host name, forgive me if I'm saying your name wrong. I just want to make sure I have it correct. Is it Aiden?
Aaron. Like brother of Moses, Aaron.
I don't know. Aaron, I don't know where I got Aiden from. I apologize. I probably looked at something too fast. Very nice to meet you, Aiden, and very nice to speak to you guys. I do have something that I have to really go over first. That's going to be a major something major we have to go over first. Because last time I spoke to you, this is kind of essential, because last time I spoke to you, you said emphatically that strawberry ice cream was the best, and we all know that it's cookies and cream.
You are not.
I want to pose a bet to you. I want to pose a bet to you that we take a poll, and I'm going to do a friendly bet that if people say that strawberry ice cream is the best, then we have to have Aiden. No, actually, you know what? I'll eat strawberry ice cream twice this week. And if not, then you have to eat cookies and cream twice this week. Or if somebody says that cookies and cream is the best, the poll says that cookies and cream is the best, Aiden has to give us a tour of his bookshelf and show us his book collection, because he has quite the collection back there.
I am fine with that. Because it's a win-win situation for me. Like, I get to see all the books that Aaron has. I get to eat cookies and cream ice cream, or I get to eat strawberry ice cream. Win-win-win. Love it. I'm down. I don't know how to make the polls myself, but if someone wants to do it, by all means. And you'd be surprised by how much flack I got for that hot. That's like one of the hottest takes I've had on here, I guess. People don't like strawberry ice cream. I didn't know that. I didn't realize it was such a topic, I was in the trenches. It's a hot topic. That's true.
Definitely a hot topic. So
that is true.
So I'm not going to take up too much time really tonight. I'm really just going to ask a few questions because I want to just get your take on this. Starting with, I don't want to necessarily go into Abiogenesis because I know that you spoke about it's not necessarily I guess your expertise. You seem like your expertise of a lot. You have a lot of knowledge. And by the way, are you going for your PhD?
Yeah, it's every day I get closer. I'm actually when I have little moments, I'm landmarking teeth in the background because my doctorate's on sexual dimorphism in the canine teeth of these fossil critters called Miocene apes. So I'm landmarking. Okay. I'm trying to get all that done a little bit in the background when I have time, when I'm doing things at my computer. So yes, I'm making progress, but it is slow because there's no grant money. It's brutal. But yeah, we'll see.
Wow.
I mean, it's going to happen. It's just, we'll see.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely congratulations on that. So before I begin, I'm going to ask a few questions, but I just want to know, I just want to let the listening audience know that sometimes on these calls, there's a bit of a lag. So if it sounds like I'm cutting you off, I'm definitely not. And I think the last time we spoke actually as well, I was a little bit like, it was crazy because I read a few of the comments and it was saying stuff that I definitely wasn't saying and definitely wasn't insinuating. So I definitely want to know that, people to know that I try to be as respectful as possible. I totally respect your opinion, and I definitely love for us to come together and just build on the knowledge together, and see if we can learn from each other. I know I'm going to learn from you. So,
Timo, I've never had a bad experience with you on here. You are all good. I look forward to it.
Yes, indeed, for sure. So to start off, my first question with RNA. So when it comes to I'm going to bring this up. Abiogenesis. The first molecule developed, if I'm not mistaken, that's RNA. Is that correct?
Are you asking me or Aaron?
Either one of you who may know.
I don't know. There are several. I talked about this with our first caller today because today's been like a really abiogenesis heavy day.
Mm-hmm.
I think RNA is proposed by some. The RNA world hypothesis or model proposes that RNA comes first. I think it's fair enough from what I know about biochemistry. It seems pretty reasonable to me. But other people
Okay.
have proposed other things might come first. Metabolism first is the other big contender. And then I was discussing a little bit earlier about how cell membranes, or like the official term would be like a phospholipid bilayer, can form spontaneously on its own as well.
Okay. So when and I heard a piece of what you were saying with the I think it was the caller before. I didn't get the whole thing, but I think he may have been asking something similar to what I was curious about with the ribosome, because if I'm not mistaken, the ribosome has to have protein in order to form. The ribosome is needed to form protein, but at the same time, the ribosome needs protein in order to form the molecules afterwards. Is that correct?
So when I was talking earlier to our previous caller, that's true with extant organisms. So with the critters that are alive right now, that's absolutely true. I don't know of any exception, but I'm also not big on microorganisms, so one might exist. However, no one proposes, at least that I know of, that the first life was equivalent to anything that's alive today. Like the protocell that's proposed is significantly more simplistic. Case in point, and I guess case in point wouldn't be the right way to put this, but in association with that, the machinery, for lack of a better term, that would have been working within this protocell would have been more simplistic as well. That's fine to propose, right? But you kind of have to have a little bit, you kind of got to nut up or shut up on that, right? Like you have to have some actual simplified versions of the ribosome protein relationship to propose that, I think. I think that's fair. And so with our last caller, I hopped on Google Scholar and I found two papers that are both from the last 5 years, last 6 years, I guess now, 2020 being the older one, that talk about the precursors to that relationship. So right now you need the ribosome and the protein, right, to synthesize, you need the ribosomes to synthesize proteins. But that being said, that has not always been the case. And in fact, the abstract of the second paper that I cited, peptide synthesis at the origin of life, even begins by saying, yeah, this is like the origin of life has so many of these chicken and egg conundrums. They say the chemical origin of life is full of chicken and egg conundrums. True. They say among these is the origin of protein synthesis. Nature's protein-based enzyme catalysts are built from the polymerization of amino acids, yet this process itself requires enzymes, ATP, and most often a ribosome. How were the first proteins formed on the path from chemistry to life? Despite more than 65 years of research into the chemical origins of life, there is still no clear answer. And then they go through all of the different hypotheses that exist to try to tackle this question. So we don't have the for sure answer to this yet. We don't know which model is correct, but there are multiple hypotheses that exist to try to answer it. And as I said with our first call, sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was listening and agreeing. Okay.
Yeah. What I was gonna.
Quick question with regards to. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead. All you.
Okay. So I did just have a quick question with the RNA, because if RNA was the first molecule to develop, it was self-duplicating, and I believe I can't think of the word right now. It's been a long work day, forgive me. I know that for one, it was self-duplicating though, right? For the first RNA molecule that developed?
Yeah, and that I think I recommended this to you last time we spoke too. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it yet, but there's a really cool paper that came out just this year, in February, of a small polymerase ribozyme that can synthesize itself and its complementary strand, which is pretty important for this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I was actually I had actually wrote down some questions about that article. I think it was that one. I read the other one that you guys suggested. And thank you again for that information. Really, really interesting. I don't want to go into my phone because if I go into my phone, I don't want it to hang up.
All
But
good,
I'm
dude.
going to try to save some of those questions for next time when I do call in. But for that that RNA molecule and that article itself, when he was talking about it was self-synthesizing. Do you think that there is? Let me ask this: where do you think that the intelligence is coming from for the original RNA molecule that's self-synthesizing?
My answer to that, I don't know that you're going to like. I don't think that it requires intelligence. I think that if it's very analogous to proposing that the periodic table requires intelligence because there seems to be an organization to it. But by and large, when we look at nature and we look at complex things that are irreducibly complex, they seem like they can't be broken down into precursors, and yet we see them emerge all the time, right? So, like the example that I give all the time for this would be the complicated relationships that we see within an ecosystem. So, in any ecosystem on the planet, deciduous forests or deserts or benthic zones of the sea or the Arctic or whatever, there are ecosystems that are held up by populations of organisms, and all of these organisms fill a different ecological role or job. So you have primary producers like grass, and then you have primary consumers like deer that eat the grass, and then you have primary or secondary consumers, excuse me, who eat the primary consumers, like the wolves that might hunt down the deer, and you have decomposers that will break things down after they've died. And all of these species are related in these intricate food webs. And if you pull any one species out of that food web, the food web as you know it collapses, right? Like we hear about this all the time in ecology, where it's like when one species goes extinct, that's like a keystone species, the whole ecosystem can collapse. And so this is a complicated relationship that is irreducibly complex. If you pull any one of the individual populations out or species out, the whole system falls apart. And it might recover, but the system as you know it falls apart. And yet we've seen ecosystems form from scratch, right? It seems like it requires an intelligence to create such a complicated network of individuals and populations that rely on one another to keep the system running. But we see them form, right, on primary succession on islands.
When you say, sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, please continue.
When you say there's ecosystems, when you say that there's ecosystems that form from scratch, can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah, so right now, in several places on the Earth, there are new islands forming. And the way that islands usually form is that volcanic activity under the ocean starts spewing a bunch of molten rock up, and that molten rock cools when it hits the cool of the seawater, and it turns into regular rock. And over time, this molten rock builds and builds and builds until eventually you have an island, right? Or you have tectonic plates that might crush up against each other and uplift the seafloor to create new island chains. This is happening in Hawaii. This is happening in Iceland. Like in a lot of different places where we're seeing new islands form. So when new islands form, right, the very first moment they come above the water, there's nothing on them, right? It's just spiky black rock that hurts to walk on and nothing can live on it. There's no plants, there's no animals. But very, very quickly, these islands start to become populated by organisms. First, it's microorganisms and floating seeds, like from mangroves or other like really salt-tolerant plants, will essentially wash up on the shores of these islands, and they start to take root. And their roots break down the volcanic rock, which over time turns it into soil. And once there's soil and plants, insects can live on the island because insects can eat the plants. And once insects are on the island eating the plants, and we're talking about very, very small plants here, like itty bitty little bitty guys, probably starting even as just algae that can tolerate being above water for periods of time. But once you've got insects, birds can live there. And birds fly all over the place and colonize new islands every single day. Bats can live there. Lizards can live there. Really, any little critter that washes up on this island can now live on this island. And from the ground up, you see these relationships between first the primary producers and the primary consumers, and then the secondary consumers, and then you need decomposers on the island, which are usually brought on board by the critters that fly over there. Sometimes they're parasites, sometimes they come, their eggs are on the dirt, on the feet of the critters, right? But slowly these islands become populated, and the very simple relationships that define these early ecosystems complexify over time. And so you can go to island chains right now in the real world and find these earliest forms of ecosystems, and you can go to adjacent islands that have been above water for a little bit longer, maybe a couple thousand years longer, and they're more developed. And the critters that live there are more complicated, and the critters that live there have more complicated relationships with each other. And so these ecosystems form and maintain themselves over time, which is, cool, but I think a really important example of something that seems like it ought to have been designed, but wasn't. Does that make sense?
Would you say that that's more of a, yeah, and thank you for that explanation. Would you say that that's more of an expansion of an ecosystem, like we already have an ecosystem, and then you have, organisms that adapt to that type of environment, or would you say that that's just a totally new ecosystem?
Well, I don't think it matters for the point of the example, right? Like, it's true that these organisms exist elsewhere and they come to inhabit this ecosystem, which is in and of itself entirely new, right? So the organisms exist elsewhere, but the relationships that they have on this specific island are unique. And they formed from nothing, de novo, right? No one put them there. Nobody told them how to interact with other critters on the island. It's like ground up complexity. Now, that doesn't mean that, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that life necessarily originated with no intelligent agent. I'm not saying that means that abiogenesis, a god or intelligent agent or aliens or whatever wasn't involved in that. I happen to not think that any intelligent agent was involved in the origination of life, but I don't think ecosystems and their complexity prove that. What I'm trying to say with this ecosystem example is that really, really complicated networks can emerge from chaos, from nothing. And so we can't look at something that's complex and say necessarily that requires an intelligence. You know what I mean?
I mean, we can. I think it's really interesting how incredible the ecosystem is throughout the Earth. I mean, if you look at just the basics of, us as humans, we breathe in oxygen, breathe out carbon dioxide. Trees breathe in carbon dioxide, breathe out oxygen. Just that parallel, that duality without the Earth, I think is really incredible. But I do want to go to the RNA, the original structure of the RNA that started. You said, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to misquote you, but you said that you don't believe that there's necessarily intelligence behind the RNA self-synthesizing. Is that correct?
No, yeah, I don't think it requires intelligence.
Okay. So I think there's extraordinary, correct me if I'm wrong, even from looking at the article that you suggested and some of the science that goes into that, there's extraordinary intelligence for the RNA to self-structure and to self-duplicate. Would you say that was more so maybe happenstance, like chance, or I'm just curious of what your thoughts are on something that has so much design in it, how it could not have intelligence?
So when you say intelligence, are you talking about the conditions that allowed this RNA to assemble, or are you talking about the rules that seem to govern how they assemble?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's both. So for example, like if we were to walk along the shore, I live in Florida. If we were to walk along the shore and look at the beach, and then we were to just see, miscellaneous grooves, along the seashore, or, different lines in the sand, we might say, oh, you know what, that's nature that caused that. But if we were walking along the sand shore, me, you, and Forrest, and it happened to, see a message that was wrote out that says, cookies and cream ice cream is the best, we would know that there's an intelligence behind that, right?
Right. No, I think
because there's actual.
Yeah, I think that's fair because we know that intelligent agents like humans use writing. You know what I mean? Like we've seen a designer design things. In this case, we've seen humans design languages and writing systems. And so when we see writing systems elsewhere, we know to associate that with a human because nature doesn't do that. But
correct.
the problem with this is we have to be able to differentiate between what requires a designer and what nature can handle on its own. And in order to do that, we have to figure out the limits of what nature is capable of versus when an intelligent agent has to step in. And I don't think we've shown at all that RNA requires an intelligent agent, right? If memory serves, and again, I'm not an expert on this kind of thing, but it self-assembles via wet dry cycling on clay. Like that doesn't require an intelligent agent, and yet it organizes itself all the same. Likewise, and this is, I think, a more intuitive example. Think of the geometric beauty of a crystal, of a diamond, of a geode. It seems, I mean, it looks like art, right? Beautiful straight lines in these Euclidean structures that build on one another at perfect right angles or whatever, right? Or the beauty of a snowflake with its fractal designs that spread out from an origination point. No one like another, as they say. And yet we know that an intelligent agent isn't required for any of that. Nobody has to actively create a crystal, or nobody is actively creating every snowflake that's ever fallen. And so if we know nature is capable of the complexity of an ecosystem and of the beauty of a snowflake or of crystallization, why are we drawing the line at RNA? Especially if we know that already in experiments that we've done or direct observations that we've made in extremophilic environments like at Yellowstone, that it can seemingly self-organize. I mean, that seems like a consequence of physics more than anything else.
Sure. And I think two quick things. I think number one, there is a difference between like patterns between certain objects and actually building like the basic forms or going into building, RNA, DNA. That's a huge, complex matter. So, for example, have you seen the patterns of, like, let's say when you have the frequency and the frequency, if you put, I don't know, stand on a certain object or whatever the case may be and play a certain frequency, it's going to make different geological patterns.
Yes, I've seen those. Those are really pretty.
Okay. Right. Very, very beautiful. It's incredible. Some of the ancient temples across the world have, taken on some of those patterns as well. But it's really incredible how, you can have certain frequencies and they can make certain geological patterns. So that's one thing if you have, something along those lines. But to build DNA, to me, looking at RNA and DNA, it's more complex than any writing system that we have. I mean, it's beyond cuneiform or anything else, to have such intelligence behind that. And that's not to say, that's not me putting a absolute stamp saying, hey, there's an intelligent designer behind it. Just to start off with the question is it intelligence going into that? Not even to name what that intelligence is, but do you think that there's intelligence to say, hey, you know what, there's intelligence to go, have RNA and DNA?
Well, if I may, with my own experience with languages, no, DNA I don't think is actually more complex or more information dense, those sorts of things compared to human languages. For one thing, huge swaths of our DNA don't actually contain messages in terms of coding for proteins. If you went, if I pulled off one of the books in the back here and I pulled it out and it had nonsense words, you would say that's a publishing mistake. If we saw that with DNA, we would just say, oh, just happened to grab roughly 90% of the genome or something of that neighborhood of how much of our genome doesn't actually code for any specific protein. If I bought a book that didn't provide any sort of useful information, it would not be sold, at least unless it's a joke book. I've seen some of those. So I think there's massive differences between what we find in DNA and what we find in actual writing. We also have the fact that when it comes to our DNA is that lots of different collections of codons can basically point to the same thing. English, for example, you change one word and you can change the meaning completely around. There's all sorts of nuances that can be hidden in our writing. Even our mistakes give away interesting kinds of information. I don't see it as nearly as analogous as you're making it out to be.
Sure. Let me rephrase that. You believe that RNA and DNA can be made, held without intelligence.
Do you mean, when you say made, do you mean organized?
Like
Because
self-synthesized,
yeah,
duplicated.
well,
You
yeah,
think
I
that
mean,
it can be that it
for
can happen
sure.
with no intelligence or no type of intelligence? It could just be a random type of occurrence.
I mean, I think this paper showed that, right? I mean, I guess let me tell you what my problem is here, Kimo, because I feel like this is a problem that I run to a lot on this topic with creationists. And like I've been making this prediction for about a decade now. If we were to create life tomorrow in a lab, like even if we were to just create life in a lab by saying, okay, we're going to mimic what we think the ancient Earth looked like. And so we're going to put this kind of sludge in here with these kinds of chemicals and sugars available, and we're going to zap it with lightning, and it's going to have this amount of moisture, and it's going to be this acidity and whatever. And then we just let it go. Like we just set it up and let it go and waited, and then life formed. Totally new, brand new life, de novo from scratch, excuse me, like abiogenesis in a lab. I don't think that would be enough for creationists. Like the classic guy, who does this type of thing a lot is like James Tour. I don't think that that would be enough for him. If we created life in a lab, the next step for guys like him would be they would say, well, it took an intelligent agent to set up the experiment. And so therefore, it still required an intelligent agent. And so I feel like that's kind of what you're getting at here. Maybe I got you wrong, so let me know if I'm misconstruing you here, but I feel like that's what you're getting at with why the paper's enough, because it's like
that
even
was
though the
my
RNA self-assembled, a person designed the experiment.
no, yeah, that was definitely not my argument. I was just going to the first RNA structure to analyze the self-synthesizing, the duplication, all the intelligence that goes into the first RNA structure and everything that even that article went over. There seems to be a lot of intelligence in that. So that's not even if we totally remove the question of, let's say, God or a creator or a designer, all of that, if we totally remove that and just look at the question of if there's intelligence behind that, just in my humble opinion, I think that there's an extreme intelligence that goes into that.
I don't
And
know
then
how
the
you could say
question
that though.
becomes, the question,
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no worries. No, I was just saying that I think there's just extreme intelligence that goes into that, along with the DNA structure, and I mean from RNA to DNA and the whole abiogenesis of what that would take. Going basically from chemistry to biology. That's an extreme process. And the type of, I guess, intelligence that would have to go into that would be, I mean, to me, a very, very highly organized, highly intelligent act. And again, that's not to say, hey, I'm time stamping this with a creator. I'm just saying if we just totally wipe all that off the table and take a look at that, on its own, it seems that there's a lot of intelligence there.
So I disagree. And the reason is because, like I said earlier, we've watched these types of, like in the case of RNA, we've watched this self-assembly happen, and it didn't take an intelligent agent. They self-assemble on clays in wet-dry cycles, right? Like that doesn't require a human to do anything. So it's like when I see that,
even in that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Maybe okay. I feel like we're crossing some wires here in a way that I don't understand. So I maybe you can clarify for me. If we can watch this happen in nature on its own, or even in a lab on its own, where is the intelligence required in that?
So that's what I'm saying. Like even when you said you can do that, like it's in the RNA itself. So like if the RNA is self-assembling on clay, right? Regardless
Yes.
of where it's doing it or what's going on, it's self-assembling, and I assume possibly self-duplicating.
Okay.
It takes intelligence for that.
Okay.
So
Okay. I think I get what you're saying. So it's the rules or the laws of biology require an intelligent agent. The fact that biology is coherent at all requires an intelligent agent to sort of set these rules in motion. Is that fair to say?
Not necessarily. I'm just looking at the very like A1 step one, which is RNA, right? So in order
Okay.
for RNA to
But
sorry, go
I
ahead.
see. I don't understand that though, because RNA contains your base pairs. So RNA uses adenine, uracil, guanine, and cytosine, and then it has your phospholipid, or not phospholipid, excuse me, your sugar phosphate backbone, and that's it. So like those things organize in the presence of wetting and drying clays over time. And in this experiment, again, that most recent one that I just mentioned, a pretty long strand of it managed to synthesize it or managed to organize itself and then synthesize itself and its complementary strand. And that's all without people being involved, right? So, like, when I hear you say that that
Right.
still requires an intelligent agent, what I hear is the fact that it's
No.
capable of
That's not what I'm
doing
saying.
that requires intelligence to institute or impose on it. That's what I'm hearing.
No. I think you're no. I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not saying
Okay.
that takes an intelligent agent, right? I'm saying for any molecule to do that on its own. Let's say if a molecule is self-synthesizing, or if it's doing something that is acting in a way that shows intelligence, right? It's making a code, or it's self-duplicating, or it's doing something that's an intelligent act. Then then what I'm saying is that there's an intelligence within that molecule, or possibly beyond the molecule.
So the
Does that make
okay.
sense?
So you're saying that the RNA itself has an intelligence and that it's able to do that. It's making the decision to do that then? Is that the idea?
That's what no, that's part of my question. So I'm saying if the RNA itself is doing it, let's just say the RNA is, would you say that, well, you already said no. I'm going to make it like this. If the RNA is doing something that looks like an intelligent act, right? So it's self-synthesizing, it's duplicating itself, which seems to be an act of intelligence. Where is that intelligence coming from? Is that coming from the RNA? Is that coming from something beyond the RNA? That's
I
part of my
I
question.
think with the RNA, chemistry is just playing out. And since we're talking about biomolecules, it's biochemistry that's playing out. And the reason why I say that is because viruses, which pretty much everybody agrees aren't alive, they display behavior, for lack of a better term, that is far more complicated than RNA self-synthesizing and assembling and self-synthesizing, right? Like viruses are
Right.
capable of injecting their genetic material into other cells and then forcing those cells, basically rewriting the genetic material of those cells to create more of themselves. I mean, I think if you're going to say that RNA requires an intelligence to self-assemble and synthesize, then viruses do too, but we know viruses aren't alive. Like we know they don't have an intelligence, that they're not living, because they don't have all of the characteristics of a living thing. So that's why that's a hard sell for me. And like I would even say that the organizing principles of physics and chemistry in general, like when things seem to happen in an ordered fashion in a comprehensible way, that feels intelligent, right? Like the fact that things, quote unquote, want to become more stable. And so they react in such a way as so as to become a more stable version of themselves, for lack of a better term. It's like that feels about as intelligent to me as RNA self-assembling. So that's why I don't find it compelling that that's an intelligence actually playing out.
Okay. Gotcha. No worries. Understood. And thank you for your response on that, for both you and Aaron. I didn't want to hold up the line too long. I do kind of want to ask one more question, but I'm going to let the other person who's waiting, I'm going to let you get to them, because I know how these things go. We'll be on the phone for another hour
Chemo, I
or
love
an
talking
hour
to
or
you,
two.
man.
So.
I do. I love talking to you. Call back. I'll pick
Absolutely.
up every time. Hey, actually, next
Okay.
time,
Sounds good.
me and Forrest are on the last Monday of this month. Call back then. We'll talk about this some more.
Awesome. Tell Forrest I said hello, and very nice speaking to you guys. You guys have a great day and take care.
Of course, dude. Take care.
All
Good
right.
night.
You too. Bye.
All right, Aaron, we've done more than enough biology related calls. So now we are going to take a theist call who wants to talk about your area, and you're going to get to monologue.
Yes, ma'am.
We have Omar, pronouns he, him, from California. Omar's a theist and he wants to follow up on our conversation about infinity. I have to assume that was a conversation Omar had with you because I don't often talk about infinity with people because it makes me anxious.
We had a conversation, I think it was last week when Forrest was on. So Omar, how you doing? Are we ready for another infinite loop? Haha.
Yeah, I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
Okay.
Doing good. Tell us about your thoughts.
Yeah,
Our floor is yours. Sorry, there's a delay, so it makes it seem like I'm talking over. The floor is yours. Tell us about your question, and then you and Dr. Adair can dialogue here.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't really have any kind of fully fleshed out argument right now. I'm kind of just following up on some stuff we spoke about last time regarding infinity and the existence of infinity, I guess, within space-time. So I'll just jump into different points here, and then I guess I'll give a point and you can give me your thoughts.
Okay.
So one thing I was thinking about Zeno's paradox, which is I guess essentially it's the equation 1 over infinity, and then how that relates to like movement through space, and how that would render movement impossible as far as going from point A to point B. But in reality, we do go from point A to point B. So isn't that kind of like an evidence that shows that 1 over infinity does not exist in reality? Because, if it did, then we should never be able to go from A to B.
So first off, just for the sake of the audience who may not have heard about Zeno's paradox, I just want to give some really quick background. So this goes back to a ancient Greek philosopher before the time of Aristotle, and he is giving this argument to show that there seems to be some sort of absurdity between the mathematical descriptions of motion and what they would imply about it being impossible. So the idea is this: if you are trying to go from point A to point B, to get there, you first have to cross half that distance. So you have gone from halfway to A to B. Then that half is remaining. Well, then you have to, of course, get past that half. And so there's a quarter left. You have to get past that half, and there's an eighth, and then a 16th, and a 32nd, and so on. And the idea is every single step you take, every time you're having it, there are still another halving that will need to be done. And so it seems like, you have to take an infinite number of steps to actually complete the motion. How do you do an infinite number of steps in a finite span? Therefore, motion is not possible. This is at least the paradox, because clearly people go from point A to point B all the ducking time. So here's the observation. Here's the mathematical proof that the observation is impossible. How do we make this work together? Aristotle already pointed out a way around this, and we can do this more completely with modern mathematics. But the main thing is this: if you're going from point A to point B to get to the halfway point, and then do the next half, that also takes half as much time. And then what the remainder part takes a quarter as much time, and so on, if you're just walking at constant speed. To show this completely, that you can actually add up all of those fractions and you actually get a finite number, is the thing that also shows you that, this is actually not impossible. So if you get into calculus, one of the things you'll learn about are convergent and divergent series. And with a series like that, where you're adding up 1 over n squared, with n equals 1, 2, 3, etc., if you add that all up, it actually adds up to a finite number. So an infinite number of things, but it adds up to a finite thing overall. So there's a way of saying, hey, this is totally achievable in a finite time span. At least that's the mathematical way of trying to make that all clearer. And in general, there are lots of different possible paradoxes, things that might be paradoxes where it looks like there's a contradiction in our thoughts, or it's just so mind-boggling, we wonder, how could we actually fully understand that? If you get into Hilbert's Hotel, this is another thing that's not a real paradox. It's not a veridical paradox. It's just one of those things that makes you go, what the heck are the mathematicians doing? This is weird. This is amazing. I'm trying to understand it, but there's no logical contradiction or problem there. Just stuff that makes you go, what? Does that help you at all, Amar?
Well, I not really. So I don't see how you said you could add up an infinite amount of things and come up with a single number or like a real number. I guess I don't really see how that is or how that could happen, but
like I say, it's an entire
cool.
branch of mathematics of dealing with these kinds of series. So I remember taking and seeing this sort of thing in calculus too, and I would have to double check how to do the proof if I want to like pull up the whiteboard and show you that 1 over n squared is a converging series. And I'm really reluctant to embarrass myself on live video without being prepped. But this is one of the relatively standard proofs out there that this is an example of a series where you add up an infinite number of things, but it gives you overall overall finite amount.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, at face value, I don't understand it, but it's I'm also like somewhat ignorant about it too. So maybe it's something I could kind of look into on my own and get a better understanding of.
Yeah, there's a ton of mathematics out there. Like, there's stuff I wish I spent more time on to understand. Things like measure theory, which seems like really foundational to a lot of things that are related to this, to topology, to probability theory. And I have not spent any time looking into it, just thinking, ooh, that sounds like a nice name. I wish I knew more. There's a ton of mathematics, and I wish I had more time to be professionally involved with it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Oh, and before I get into my second point here, I should have mentioned from the beginning, you had mentioned time B theory last time we spoke. I kind of try to look some stuff up about it, but I really wasn't understanding it very well. So I'm still like I don't really understand it still. But hopefully I'll get a chance to. I think I realize maybe if I have a better I don't know what block universe is. That's something you mentioned last time we spoke. I think maybe if I kind of understand that, then I can perhaps understand time B theory.
Yeah. There's a few different things that have different labels that are either identical or overlap a lot. There's the B theory of time. Sometimes it's also called eternalism. The A theory of time is sometimes also just called presentism. Those more human names at least make a little more sense in that presentism is just saying the present is the only time that actually exists. The past and the future don't exist. The future doesn't yet exist. The past no longer exists. On eternalism, all moments of time exist. There is no coming and going out of existence. The name A and B theory of time goes back to a early 20th century philosopher writing like just before Einstein was publishing his papers on relativity. And basically, it was interesting timing that there were these very different philosophical, theoretical physics discussions of what time is happening at about the same time. And they help one interpret the other or gives a context for the other that makes them more fulfilling. So while not everyone necessarily has to become a philosopher, having this philosophy in mind helps give you a fuller picture of what time actually means. And from time to time, we need to talk about time.
Which one are you, Dr. Adair? Are you a presentist or an eternalist?
Well, eternalism is the only thing that's consistent with special and general relativity. You can try to go with A theory, but the only way you can do that is you basically have to propose new physics that kind of hides the fact that everything looks consistent with Einstein, but it's not. And there's like a couple of philosophers and like a handful of physicists who are on board with that because they need it to make their argument for God work. And quite literally, it's they believe God exists. Here's the argument to get to God. Here's a premise. What do we do to justify that premise so they get to the conclusion that they already had? It's an example of eternally large circular reasoning.
The eternity of every moment in time is devastating. All my embarrassing moments preserved in the time stream.
And the future ones exist too, so nothing you can do about it. They're already there.
Excellent. So good.
Yeah.
It's locked in.
The other way to think about it in terms of like a block universe, Another way to think about it is if you have a movie film, especially like an old traditional film, every cell in that film already exists. You might only be looking at any one cell at a time,
As it
at a
plays
moment.
through. Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
but the entirety of the film exists all at once. And it's not that you watch one cell of the film and all of a sudden it stops existing. That only happens if you have a bad projector.
Right. Or a bad space-time continuum. Zing.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, Omar. I hijacked the conversation. Back to you.
No, not at all. It's a really weird and interesting topic, you know. So I mean, anything you have to add over here, I'm definitely all ears. Okay, I had another, I guess, thing I wanted to mention. So during our conversation last week, I was talking about how I worded something like, from this moment here, previous to this moment, did a set number of events occur, or did a growing number of events occur? And I said that in a way to say that a growing number of events would represent infinity. But then you made the point that, well, it couldn't be infinity because we're still adding to it, meaning that means there's a number larger than it. So if we kind of take the same reasoning, and so as time progresses, and more events occur, that means, I feel like, doesn't that nullify the idea of an infinite number of events preceding today? Because with each moment that passes, more events occurred, meaning we're adding to that number of past events, which is to say, so then can't we say it's not possible that an infinite number of events preceded right now because it's still being added to?
It's no more impossible than counting from 1 to 2, even though there's an infinite number of negative numbers before that. And then when I go from 2 to 3, I've added to that set, so to speak. But wait, didn't I just add to infinity? The main thing that makes this not a mathematically valid thing to do is that infinity is not a number. You can't do arithmetic operations to it. So if you talk about like adding and subtracting from infinity, yeah, you get those sorts of absurd things that infinity plus 1 equals infinity. When you do that, yeah, it becomes nonsensical. Instead, you have to treat infinity as a set of numbers, or in fact, you can even do sets of sets. But once we start talking about sets of sets, then we get all sorts of other new paradoxes. One paradox per night, okay? That's my limit, my drinking limit. But main thing there is you do not talk about adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing with infinity as if it were a number on the number line. It's basically describing the number line, which is a different sort of object. I think another way to think about it is apple minus orange equals what? This sounds like a weird math problem, and you realize, oh, it's because you're not doing operations that can actually do arithmetic statements for. So you need to redefine what you're doing and actually have mathematically valid operations that are internally consistent. And infinity doesn't let you do that kind of thing. There are mappings you can do that can approximate what it looks like to like add sets or divide sets, but it's not the same thing as addition and subtraction that you learned in grade school.
Okay, so when I think of infinity, in my mind, I'm thinking of like a quantity. So is that the wrong way to think about it? Like I'm thinking of a numerical quantity, basically?
You can kind of think of it as a quantity, but it's a quantity that just has no upper limit, which doesn't sound like something that you can really get a grasp on. So with set theory, you are basically just talking about collections, and then the infinite set, or there's different size infinities. I have to bring out my mug because I use the symbol here for the natural number, the smallest infinity in mathematics. And the set of all natural numbers is one kind of infinity. It is the smallest infinity. It includes all of the natural numbers. It's the same size as all of the even numbers. It's the same size as all of the rational fraction numbers, but it is smaller than all of the real numbers. And many more other sets are bigger than that. And yes, when you can have things that are one infinity bigger than another, you have to say, okay, this clearly can't be based on the sort of mathematics, you learned in third grade. It's clearly a different kind of math. It's a fascinating branch of mathematics. It's been extremely fruitful, but it is not the same thing as the 2 + 2 = 4 algorithms that you were taught as a young person.
Okay. I actually, so that kind of touches on another thing I was thinking of. So last week you had kind of gave me an example of different sets of infinity. And so one example, I think you put up 5 fingers on one hand and 2 fingers on the other hand. And you said one infinity can be bigger than another one because they don't line up 1 to 1. And then after that, you spoke about another example about all round numbers versus all even numbers. And you had said that they're the same size, like, because we could just either divide it by 2 or multiply it by 2. Sorry, that was confusing. If we're talking about round numbers, we could just divide it by 2 and that equals the even numbers. So
the opposite, if you multiply by 2. But yeah, if you could do that 1-to-1 mapping between every member in one set to one and only one member in the other set, then they're the same size because everybody is paired up. Basically, if you can have the numbers do the buddy system and no one is without a buddy, it's the same size set.
So then going back to the initial example you gave of like 5 fingers versus 2 fingers, can't we just multiply one side by 2.5 and use the same reasoning to say that these are the same sized infinities as one another?
What does it mean to have 2.5 fingers point to one other finger? That wouldn't make a 1-to-1 map.
Okay. Well, I guess okay. I guess mathematically, if we just do 5 versus 2, I mean that would make sense, correct? But you're saying translating it to reality, which is like your fingers.
Yeah. And more importantly, the division by 2 I'm talking about is basically how do you derive the address for mapping between the two places. So an address is the right term here. If I want to figure out where you are, Omar, I would need to know your address or your GPS coordinates, things like that. And what I'm saying is this dividing by 2 or multiplying by 2 is a way of taking one address and turning it into the address for the other set. So it's not like the real world where I can take my grandmother's address divided by 2 and figure out my parents' address. That doesn't quite work, but because we can at least set this up mathematically, we can do this address exchange and make sure that every address in one set corresponds to one and only one address in the other, and vice versa. And because we can do that, we can say that every single one of these members in one set lines up to one and only one set in the other, and that's our way of saying that they're the same size. Everybody has a partner, and nobody's left alone.
Okay. All right. All right. Yeah, and then I guess there's also you had named a few people. You mentioned a few people I could kind of look into who speak about this topic. One was Majesty of Reason. I think his name is Joe Schmidt. And,
yes.
Well, he comes more from a philosophy perspective rather than a science perspective. So I'll just mention that up front. I feel like I was listening to him a little bit, and it seems like he agrees with me. And I'll kind of go through what I saw. He has a video called Paradoxes of Infinity. And in that video, there's a section called Vicious Circularity. And in there, he says, causations must be prior to their effects. So there's a connection between the prohibition of circular explanations and prohibition of infinite causal regress. And so he gives an example. He says, suppose an infinite causal regress where each number is caused by n plus 1. So then in that example, let's consider the existence of the even-numbered entities and the odd-numbered entities. And then he says E is causally explained by O. The even numbers are causally explained by odd, and odd is causally explained by even. And he says that since such circular explanation or causation is impossible, an infinite causal regress must be ipso facto impossible as well. Yeah, I mean, I came across this. I don't know exactly what to do with that, but I guess I wanted to kind of share some of his thinking on that. He kind of seems to...
My thought, though, now it's been a while since I've watched these sorts of particular videos, but my memory is he brings up this paradox to show, what's the paradoxical nature and where it comes from in the philosophy literature. And then he talks about, here are ways that the paradox may be resolved, or here are the things that are ambiguous about it. There's a long history of infinity paradoxes going all the way back to the pre-Socratic philosophers. So yeah, there's about 25 centuries of people messing around with this. And as far as I know, or as far as I can remember, Schmidt is not saying in any of these cases, here's a paradox and it conclusively shows that infinite causation is not possible. I think he brings us up, shows here's where the arguments are, and here are the things that make that argument not as strong as it might seem. I don't know if he says he has defeaters for all of them, but he's usually trying to set things up so you can understand what he is discussing. But I would have to go back to know his full arguments. His videos are often 2 or 3 hours long, so you'll forgive me that I do not have them well memorized. I only point to him because he's at least done the legwork of where the philosophy is, and I have not done that anywhere near the extent he has. I mean, I think he's now a grad student at Princeton philosophy department. So yeah, he's clearly done the homework of being the philosopher. I could not even remember his first name. So by comparison, one of these two people knows their stuff better than the other, and it's him.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair. I also I looked up Graham Oppie a little bit, and he agreed with you. But just much like with Majesty or Reason, philosophy is a little bit hard for me to kind of wrap my head around. I'm more interested in the science aspect of things, but it's weird because they kind of go hand in hand with this topic. So I guess, but yeah, I guess, I don't really have much more to say than that. I did get into some stuff, but it takes a little time. So hopefully I get to get into this a little bit more. And because even right now, you could probably tell, I'm confused as hell. It's just.
Me too, my friend. Don't worry about it. I am nodding along. I am also not physics or philosophy brain. So when Dr. Adair is going on about this stuff, I'm like, I guess. I think I get it sometimes, but it's tough.
And admittedly, there's a fair number of things that I have not followed well or understood well. A popular thing is the Grim Reaper paradox. It's supposed to be another kind of infinity paradox that I don't quite understand. And I don't understand, I don't understand how it's supposed to show infinite causality doesn't work, and so I definitely don't understand the defeaters for the Grim Reaper. It's conversation that I've not been able to fully understand, let alone articulate. I know of it. The name is cool.
It is cool. Yeah, that's cool.
But beyond that, I don't think I could express it well, let alone tell you why I agree or disagree. I'm mostly unable to deal with this particular argument at this time. And I know other philosophers are spending a lot of time either bolstering it or defeating it, and I do not know what the state of the art is on Grim Reaper paradoxes.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. It's every now and then I feel like I'm finally getting a grasp on something, and then something else pops up and just throws it all out of whack again.
That's what philosophy will do. You will find so much of what you don't know, and either you will come to hate it, or you will come to realize this is actually how you really generate knowledge.
Yeah, maybe, that's my hope. with this whole entire thing.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I'm calling in and stuff.
Yeah. If I may repeat something allegedly said by Socrates, to show some real old school philosophy, he was declared by the oracle at Delphi to be the wisest person, and Socrates tried to figure out why the oracle would say that, and he eventually came to the conclusion that he is wise because he knows nothing. That sort of humility is, I think, what really allows a person to truly learn things and grow from it, rather than merely thinking you know a thing, or thinking because you know one thing, you know all the other things. The humility of really breaking it down and saying, what do I actually know? What am I just merely confident in, rather than what can I actually show and demonstrate? And once you realize that that is a different way of thinking and approaching, you've become a more philosophically, scientifically minded person, and you're the kind of person I like to have conversations with.
Yeah, no, likewise. I know I didn't really come in with much much juice on this call, but I was looking into things, and I just wanted to mention some stuff that stuck out to me and get your take on it. So yeah, I do hope to be able to speak to you again once I can maybe formulate more coherent thoughts or arguments regarding this stuff. But time will tell. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say on my end. And yeah, thanks, man. I respect you, and I appreciate you taking the time speaking with me.
Omar, thank you for calling in. I imagine we'll have a chance to talk again. It will never be an infinite amount of talking, but it will be enjoyable.
Yes, sir. Okay, you guys have a good one.
Thanks, Omar. Take care. See, yeah, you got that was a good physics call. That was a juice of physics just for you.
I would say more pure mathematics, but I nonetheless enjoy squeezing out the juice while I'm having my tropical mixed Sprite.
Ooh, yum. Wait, is that good? Tropical mixed Sprite?
I'm enjoying it. My wife bought it a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, I did not expect this. I'm tasting it, and then I'm like, I'm glad I'm drinking it.
Huh. I've never had tropical mixed Sprite. That feels like the kind of thing that would be in the what's the name of those things? The Coca-Cola, they're the big vending machine things with a million flavors. There's a word for it.
Coca-Cola Freestyle.
The Freestyle. Thank you, Lux. The Coca-Cola Freestyles. That feels like the kind of thing that would be in a Coca-Cola Freestyle machine, where it'll be like, oh, you want pomegranate Fanta? Like, they got every flavor of those.
I'm 70% sure my wife bought it just at the local grocery store, maybe Whole Foods, but I don't think so. I'd have to check with her because I wasn't there on that fateful trip.
Perhaps it has its origins in the freestyle machines, though. Who's to say?
Speaking
All
of
right.
freestyle, our next call.
Let's do it. We're just gonna go down the list. I think we've got all atheist agnostic callers on the line.
Yes.
I believe lines are closed, or they might still be open. I don't know. Lux, are they still open?
No.
Okay. We're gonna go down our list. Then we got GA pronouns he, him from Mississippi. Am I?
Michigan.
Or is that Michigan? It's Michigan. That was my second guess. From Michigan, Jason Agnostic, and he is calling back to talk about UFOs. Let's go. Jay, you've called before to talk about aliens. Tell us about your encounter, or elaborate upon your encounter that you've told us about before.
Okay, can you guys hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
Yes.
All right, cool. So yeah, I'm a little bit nervous, so excuse me if I'm. Anyway,
All good, dude.
I went camping. I went camping last autumn with my friend, and it was really late at night. We were staying at a campsite right on the water at a little inland lake, and I was looking out at the cabins across the water at the lights, and he was looking up at the sky. And that's when he saw a blue light. He said it was almost like bobbing up and down, almost like a firefly, like up and down, kind of slow and smooth like that. And then that's when he like tapped my shoulder to get my attention. And when I looked up, it turned into a green light and then like slowly started to grow, like it was getting bigger, getting closer. And then all of a sudden it like suddenly turned to a fiery red and like shot off. And like, I don't know, I try to look at, sorry, what?
No, I'm sorry. I was going to ask some clarifying questions, but continue. I want to hear the whole thing, and then I'll ask my clarifiers.
I was just going to say, like, I try to be skeptical about things. I try to not say like, oh, it was aliens, right? I try to say like, oh, like, could it have been a drone? Like, it didn't look like it was moving like anything I would recognize. And I looked into it in the next few days to try to figure out what it could be, but I couldn't really come up with a good explanation. And I told him, I'm like, there's no shot it's aliens. Like I've looked into like the Drake equation and I've thought these things through before. Like there's no shot that it's an alien. And he like, I can't convince him it's not because I can't come up with something that it is.
So there are a couple of angles on this, right? First of all, I love that. I think that encounter with your friend is exactly emblematic of the two ways that people take unexplained encounters with things. Because, like, we see weird things sometimes. We see weird things in the sky. We see weird things in the woods. Sometimes it's really easy to explain. Sometimes it's more difficult to explain. I love your attitude of, okay, just because we don't know specifically what it is doesn't mean it's aliens, because that is true. Right? Defaulting to aliens when we don't have any concrete evidence that aliens exist, let alone have come here. Although I think there is pretty decent support now that there used to be life on Mars. I think Dr. Adair could probably tell us for sure where we're at on that. I know they were bopping around on that.
Life on Mars is a big difference from UFOs.
Totally, yeah. Like in the best case scenario, scientifically speaking, we maybe once had microbial life on Mars, right? It's like, and that is a big difference from intelligent aliens coming here and visiting us or like messing with us or whatever. So I think that dichotomy is very emblematic of every weird experience. People can come at it from different ways, but invariably someone's going to take the side of, okay, that was weird, but we don't know what it is. That doesn't mean we default to aliens, or for that matter, demons, ghosts, Bigfoot, God, interdimensional travelers, whatever. Whereas the other person is like, oh, you know what? That had to have been aliens because what else could it be? Right? And it's like, it could be a million other things. You know what I mean? Right. So I love the way that you've approached it there. Just because we don't know specifically what it is doesn't mean we should default to the most spectacular thing. But then there's the thing that you saw in general. I want Dr. Adair to have some time because he was going to say something too, but I have a couple of clarifying questions about the encounter itself. So first, Aaron, by all means, you were getting ready to speak.
All right. Just you're also bringing back some memories here for me, Jay, because I'm also a Michiganian. I did a lot of camping and Boy Scouts in Michigan. Makes me wonder, like, when it comes to campsites, if you're going to places like Higgins Lake and seeing things like this, you're bringing me back to be as a half my size when it comes to my memories. But I'll leave it agnostic to where you were, just so you don't have to like dox yourself. Nonetheless, drone is the most immediate thing that comes to my mind about the color changes and its location in the sky. That's at least where I would most immediately think of what that could be. And especially, it's really hard to know what the size of these things are, because when you're seeing the thing, if you don't know the size of it, you really can't tell how far away it is, because if it's 1 meter wide but really far away, it looks like a tiny little thing. But if it's a really little thing right next to you, it's going to still look tiny. So unless you know what the size is, you can't just go from there's that light, I know how far away it is, and you wouldn't be able to also say confidently that it's getting closer or farther away necessarily. Even if it's getting brighter, that could also just be that its lights are now pointing more in your direction. So it's really hard to tell in those kinds of conditions if this thing was actually closer or farther away, and ultimately how far away it was. Let's also talk about the auditory situation. What could you hear at that time? Or was there a bunch of other like background noise from like the wind blowing through the trees and things like that?
It was a really clear night and there wasn't really much wind. Like all we could hear was just like the gentle waves of the lake. And it was like a little inland lake, so it didn't have like loud waves. But other than that, we didn't hear anything.
Okay. If it is a drone, and like I say, there's no way I can confirm that, but if it is a drone, I would think then that it must have been relatively far away if you're not able to hear the fan blades whirling. So that's at least where we would have to limit that hypothesis. If it is a drone, it must be relatively far away, and it never got close enough for you to be able to tell what it was, especially in the dark. And you're probably seeing the lights change as it's changing its orientation, or if it has to go into safety mode because, oh no, it just hit a tree branch and now it needs to return back to base before the batteries die. Things like that. That's at least my guesstimate of what could be happening.
I will say to that point, my father-in-law is really into drones and he's really into drone photography. He's also like a sailor. So a couple of times we've gone out like on the ocean in the sailboat with him, and he'll like throw the drone up into the air to go take some pictures from above of like the sailboat. And I'm always floored when we're out there at how you see the drone, you see it moving, and it seems like it's relatively close to the boat, and I don't hear a thing from it. Of course, I'm hearing the waves of the ocean to some degree, and I'm hearing the wind that's in my ears, not necessarily because it's windy, but just because you're moving. So that's probably part of it. But the reason I brought that up is because I don't think it takes a lot. Like drones can be pretty quiet. I would think that if it was close, you'd hear something. So if it was like dead quiet, that is kind of weird. I will say too, the colors are really interesting. So you saw blue, green, and red. Those are like the drone colors, right? Like aren't those usually the colors the drones have?
I'm going to be honest, I don't know a whole lot about drones, but I just
hold on, I'm going to Google it. What colors do?
And I think they also change their colors when they go like, I think at least some drones, they'll also change their colors if they have to like go into safety warning mode. So like, oh, battery's about to die or I've crashed in something, changing to red color to kind of say, watch out, watch out. I don't drive enough drones to know enough of the details. I definitely cannot identify what drone this would be based on this description, not in a million years.
Way. Me either.
But while you're looking this up, may I talk about my UFO experience?
Yes, please. I didn't know you'd had one.
Actually, I was just gonna say, like, I'm not sure, like, just the way that it was moving, like it.
Yeah.
I mean, what I saw was it was green and then it was glowing as it was coming closer to us, and then like. It suddenly shot off and kind of like got a little bit smaller as it faded out. And we didn't see any other lights after that. We didn't see it come down. We didn't see anything like that. And we were looking out trying to see it for at least a few good more minutes in like a holy shit moment. But I don't know.
Yeah. I just want to also give this example because I have. Yeah, I just want to give an example because, like I say, I have had also a moment where I was looking up at something. I couldn't identify it. I thought it was flying, and so it would make it a UFO. Now, I wasn't in Michigan at the time. I was in a really terrible place, a place called Ohio.
Much worse.
Yes. Specifically, I was in Columbus, and I was looking pretty much straight up in the sky. I see this really bright light, and my senses are this thing is moving, but it's moving in such a way that it doesn't seem consistent with being a satellite. Because I've seen satellites move in the sky before when it's really dark. Plus, I'm in the middle of Columbus. It's not exactly a pitch dark city. I've got streetlights right around me when I'm looking up at this thing, so it must be quite bright. It's quite bright. It's moving, and it's moving in this way that just doesn't seem consistent with satellites. And I'm staring at this for a long time, and then eventually I figured out what this was. It was Jupiter. And the reason I thought it was moving was that the clouds way up high in the sky were still kind of in my peripheral vision, but being blown by the winds. And the movement of those clouds gave me the sense that, oh, that light is moving, because it seems to be moving relative to those clouds. And I got my sense of orientation mixed up, because the clouds were kind of just on the periphery of my vision. I could just barely notice them, except that I was standing there and looking intently for like a few minutes to figure out what the heck I was looking at. Jupiter was also changing its colors from time to time because of the shimmering of the atmosphere. So all these weird things where I'm thinking there's movement when there isn't, when there's these color changes due to the atmosphere. And fundamentally, what was I identifying as a UFO? One of the most common things you see in the night sky, one of the planets. So the only reason I figured out what it was is that I was able to observe it for a fair amount of time. Jupiter didn't run away from me that night. Other nights, it's really scared of me, but that night, it was okay. So just an example of even simple things under the right conditions can fool your eyes and your brain, even if you have a fair bit of knowledge and training in what these things are supposed to be. So I got lucky that I figured out what was fooling me. If I only was able to look at it for 5 seconds, I'd probably be telling you right now, I saw a UFO and I have no idea what it was.
Yeah, that's just where I'm at. Like,
Jay,
I don't know. I mean, a drone makes the most sense. Sorry.
No, sorry, I interrupted you. I didn't mean to. Yeah, I mean, I think a drone makes the most sense too, and I think that it's hard to rule a drone out. And I think that in your conversations with your friend, the way that when you talk to him about this next, I think the way that you should handle it, if it was me, this is how I would do it, is I would be like, okay, like what's making you default to aliens? Like instead of making you come up with a for sure alternate explanation, you can kind of take the stance of like, okay, so it's either aliens or it's literally anything else. Why should we go with aliens? Like, why do you think, we should go with this perspective? And then, have your friend make their case. Because at the end of the day, it's like, it's benign. Like people see weird stuff all the time, and you don't necessarily, as I said earlier, have to know exactly what it is. The world is mysterious. We don't always have guaranteed answers, but that doesn't mean we default to like the wackiest thing imaginable.
Right. Okay.
Chill?
Yeah, that's kind of where, chill. That's where I'm at, I guess. I don't know. It's just hard for me to convince him that it wasn't. He's just really hanging on to that idea. I think he likes the idea of, we saw aliens while we were up north,
Yeah. I mean, and it is a cool story. The way that I would pitch it, if I was you, is I would be like, look, you can still say you saw a UFO. It was an unidentified flying object.
Right.
I mean, it was aliens. You saw a UFO. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, thanks for calling, Jay. We got a couple other calls to get to, but
I do have to also add one other anecdote onto this because of where Jay is at.
Go.
When it comes to UFOs, the go-to skeptic explanation for these things is that that thing you saw was swamp gas. The origination of that actually happened in a UFO case in Michigan back in the 60s. But the person who was proposing swamp gas wasn't a UFO skeptic. It was actually one of the leaders of Project Blue Book and a person who did believe he was detecting aliens. He just thought in this particular case, the explanation was swamp gas. So funny enough, skeptic, not skeptic, is proposing swamp gas because of a UFO sighting in Michigan. For all I know, not too far away from where you are, Jay. I can't confirm that, but there's a history of UFO stuff going down in Michigan. So
eyes on the skies.
Keep looking. Yeah, keep watching the skies.
I want to believe. Take care, Jay.
I want to believe, but I'm not convinced. Good luck on your dissertation, Erika.
Hey, thank you so much.
That's all I wanted to say. All right.
Call back again with your update. Bye-bye. All right. Next up, we got Sarah, pronouns she, they. This is a very interesting spelling of Sarah. I've never seen this spelling before. From Canada. They're an atheist. They want to discuss the nature of science. Does science require a certain level of faith and the difficulty science education faces? Hoo boy, we got our work cut out for us. Sarah, welcome to SkepTalk. You're on with Erika and Dr. Adair. Can you hear us?
Yes, absolutely.
Sweet.
Hey, Erika, Dr. Adair, and shout out to producer Lux.
Shout out indeed. Lux takes good care of us.
Absolutely. Should I get started?
By all means.
Okay, so there was a couple of calls earlier tonight that sort of kind of reinforced what I want to talk about.
Was it
and
David?
Also, Dr. Adair.
Was it David?
I mean, the call with Brian, the call with David, specifically when he said no one knows what scientists are talking about, and thus basically that boils down to people find religion more believable. Anyway, even yourself, Dr. Adair, you sort of mentioned not having that, all that great of a grasp on biology, right? Because that's not your area of expertise. So I was listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson a while back, and he was discussing the difficulty that science education has in our current era, basically because of how sophisticated certain fields of science have gotten, that depending on who you talk to, right, like they might know a whole lot about their area of expertise, but like not a whole lot about, other aspects of science. And so how are we as lay people supposed to really, have all this this trust if we ourselves don't understand it, right? And just a little bit of background before you sort of give me your ideas here, your opinions. I have been really struggling to understand general and special relativity, specifically with how gravity is supposed to affect time. And maybe as a side note, maybe I could get some help with that.
There are a couple of different ways we could talk about this. I want to give you an example of something that happened to me recently that kind of pissed me off. That is right on the lines of this, but I want to make sure I find it first. Okay, I did find it. Excellent. We have a specialization problem in science. It's a good thing, but it is a problem nonetheless. It used to be that people could be polymaths, back in the scientific revolution, all the way into the 1800s, and then all the way really until maybe 1920s, 1930s. It was pretty easy to know a little bit about most subjects. Right. I would say the era of the polymaths died around the mid 1800s, but you could still get a decent handle on a lot of subjects until the mid 1900s. And then we just got too good at discovering things about too many different areas. And it became really difficult to keep a grasp, I guess I should say there's a word I'm looking for, to keep abreast, maybe? Like to be aware of the current trajectory of every single field. That is because we know too much. And as I said earlier, I think that's a good thing, but it does mean that as we've moved further and further away from one another field-wise, we lose opportunities on collaboration, and we lose opportunities to appreciate the nuance of different topics. The example that I want to give is, you have probably heard, and a lot of the chat has probably heard, that last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, there was a publication about the Cretaceous Kraken. Have you guys heard about this? The Kraken of the Cretaceous? Anybody hear about this? No? Yes, no? Dr. Adair?
I don't think so.
No? Chat? Let me check chat. Let me see if they heard this. Chat, if you heard about the Cretaceous Kraken, say, I heard about the Cretaceous Kraken. And in the meantime, I'll just talk about it. Basically, there was a discovery of several beaks, which are the hard parts that preserve from many mollusk species. They're soft-bodied, except for the beaks and the pen, usually. And so this beak was discovered, several beaks actually were discovered from the Cretaceous that are just enormous. And when you use modern-day mollusks as a scale, or I should say cephalopods as a scale, you end up with a pretty wide range. But essentially, you end up with an octopus, a blanket octopus, if memory serves, that could be like 19 meters long max. Like an insanely gigantic octopus that would have been capable of preying on mosasaurs, which are enormous marine reptiles that lived during the Cretaceous, during the entire Mesozoic. And so, that's what everybody ran with, is that it's like, oh my God, like the Cretaceous Kraken. And not just that, but the beak of this thing is asymmetric. And when beaks are asymmetric, that implies lateralization of the brain or handedness in humans, which is an indicator of advanced cognition. So not only was it a Cretaceous Kraken that was 19 meters long, but also it was probably intelligent. And that's the headline that was all over the place. And I saw a lot of science communicators that I really like and respect, at the very least, talking about the massive size of this thing. Now, I don't know very much about cephalopods, but I was really interested in this because it's like, it's a Cretaceous Kraken. I mean, it's like an enormous octopus that lived during the Cretaceous. That's really cool. And it preyed on mosasaurs. That's insane. So I did a little bit of digging about it. And I discovered a couple of people who were talking about the Cretaceous Kraken over on Blue Sky who actually study cephalopods or like animals that are similar to cephalopods. And a couple of things stuck out, unfortunately. The first is that what a lot of people were reporting was the upper end of the range. So people were reporting that this Cretaceous kraken was 19 meters long. The reported estimate in the paper is 7 to 19 meters long. So it could have been 7 meters long or 19 meters long or anywhere in between. So it's already a huge range, and it's a little problematic to report only the maximum. Most people didn't. Most people reported the range, but that doesn't change the clickbait, which was it's a Cretaceous kraken. But the main thing that was alarming was the lateralization thing, because reporting on an intelligent kraken, I hear, oh, well, if the beak is asymmetric, that's like handedness in humans, so that must mean they're intelligent. I don't know anything about like cephalopods though. Like I don't know, does asymmetry map really well with cognition in cephalopods? Like if you look across cephalopods, the ones that have asymmetric beaks display higher cognitive abilities than the ones that don't. Like are octopus asymmetric and squid aren't? And the answer, as I came to find out, is that it is not nearly that simple, right? It's not as simple as if it's asymmetric, that means it's cognitively inclined. So virtually all the parts of this story, as they were put forward, were either exaggerated or even, I guess I should just say all the aspects were exaggerated or the upper end was taken and run with. But you wouldn't know any of that unless you were a person who researched cephalopods. And the only reason I even knew a little bit about it is because asymmetry, handedness, and lateralization are in human evolution. That's our topic in human evolution, which I do know decently well. So there was like an inroad for me there. But if you're just like an average person who's like interested in prehistoric creatures, it'd be incredibly difficult to actually get to the bottom of this whole thing, even if you read the paper. You know what I mean? So it's like, we do have a problem with this. And the answer to the problem is, in my opinion, the people that do the research need to be like on point. They need to be the point on every time research is released. Like you need to be the person who signs off on every interview, on every, publication that has something to do with your research. Not saying you have to write it, but you should it should be common practice that you get to read over it and have the final say on whether or not it goes to print, so that this information is accurate per the researchers who are putting it out there. And like some scientific journals, I will say, are doing a little bit better. Dr. Adair, I don't know if they're doing this in physics, but in paleontology and primatology and paleoanth, we're getting editor summaries or like layperson summaries in addition to the abstract. So everybody knows, but the abstract is like the short, condensed version of what the paper found, the problem and what the paper found. But now the editor summary is like an additional like layperson breakdown of what the abstract is, which is really helpful. That's a step in the right direction. But we also live at a time where everybody has their own microphone and entertainment and information is completely decentralized. So like even that can be fun. So what I'm trying to say is I recognize that there is an issue here, and myself and many people that I know are trying to do their part to like make this a little bit clearer for the average person, but it's going to take a lot of work on everybody's part. And while we're moving in the right direction, we're not quite there yet. So I would say, as the average person out there, like for me, when I'm looking at areas that I don't understand very well, what I do is I look for quotes from the researchers themselves, and I prioritize that information. So when I read like an explainer article, I don't listen to a single thing that explainer article says unless it is in quotation marks from the researcher in question, because that's straight from the horse's mouth. If it's something that I'm really interested in, I usually go to Google Scholar and like try to find a primer on it, but that's like obviously a pretty big step, and I don't do that for most subjects. So I would say be careful and be diligent and approach new news with skepticism unless you're reading it from the publishers themselves, which I hate that that's the situation right now, but we're just in a point of time right now where we need to be diligent until the pendulum swings back towards having some level of trust in our institutions. Those are my thoughts.
See, the work that you're doing in collaboration with Will Duffy, I find is absolutely amazing, because like, again, I'm not a scientist myself, right? Yet I get to watch and listen to people with better expertise than I have, or all the information that they're willing to share with the public. And sitting there and listening to your presentations each month, I've been learning so much about evolution, which, as somebody who is, struggling with having grown up, in a Christian family, whatever, there was a whole lot of like evolution denialism that was taught to me, right? So
Yeah.
I'm getting to hear what you're talking about, and going back to my little like question about like, does it take a little bit of faith? Faith might not be the right word, but I get that, evolution is the best the best description that we have for the origin of species on Earth, whatever. But it's one thing to hear that from others, and it's another to fully understand what it means. And let's be honest, like if all you do is you go to school, you get a high school education, they don't talk a lot about it. Like they give you kind of a primer on it, and that's about it. And then you go, 10, 20 years down the road, you forget everything that you learned. And that's why we're starting to see a lot of these people that you guys are dealing with, all these callers who don't believe in it because they're just not getting that education.
Yep. It's one of those things. So first of all, thank you very much. I'm really glad you're enjoying the series. It seems to be really helpful to a lot of people, so that's delighted me to my core. I'll say, it's been an exercise in learning for myself as well, because some of the topics that I've covered so far aren't my specific area, like cetacean evolution or bird evolution, in which case I send those PowerPoints to people who do know those areas before I pitch them to make sure that the information is correct. But like we can't do that with everything. I think, I don't know, you've tapped on a problem that has been brewing in the United States for like a century now. And there are a lot of reasons why this place in particular is susceptible to this type of thing. A lot of it owes to our very individualistic nature, which can be a really, really good thing and also a really, really bad thing. But we don't trust expertise anymore. We don't. Like the average person doesn't have trust or respect for expertise. And so like, what do you do? How do you rebuild trust in institutions? Because it turns out when the rubber meets the road, people do actually trust expertise because they don't take their car to the doctor, they take their car to the mechanic. And they don't go to the mechanic to get a checkup, they go to their doctor. So implicitly, we do trust experts, but we are much more skeptical on expertise than perhaps we should be. And I think that happens to be one very small part, the nature of this country, and a much larger part, the intentional, coordinated demonization of expertise, and the presentation of universities and of experts as stuffy ivory tower elitists. Neither of those things are true, and I think this is immediately obvious to anybody who's ever like had an encounter with a researcher. Professors can be a little bit different because professors, there's like a power dynamic there, and I think people have bad experiences with professors sometimes and use that to characterize all of academia. And academia has its problems. Do not get me wrong on that one. But most scientists are very down to earth, very apprehensive people who are doing their best to answer difficult questions, usually in collaboration with many different people. There's no cabal, there's no elitism, there's no ivory tower. And if there is, it's constructed by journals and institutions outside of the researchers themselves. I mean, pro tip, if you ever want free access to an article, email the author of the article. They will give it to you for free. I have never once in my entire life emailed an author and had them respond and not give me the paper. I've been ghosted a couple of times, but every time they respond, they're like, yeah, here's the paper. People are eager. Scientists are eager to get this information out there. So to fix this, on one hand, we need good science communicators, and we need researchers active in communicating their own work. I think that both of those are really important. But on the more institutional side, we have got to rebuild the trust in institutions like universities, like medicine, in order to fix this glaring lack of respect for expertise in this country. And I think the only way to do that is time, education, and transparency. And so I don't know. I have a multi-step plan that once I'm finally put in place as the supreme leader of the world that I will implement. But until that day, I'm voting and trying my best. Shit's bad.
For sure.
It's not good. I will say one more thing. I will say this. Sarah, you mentioned that, we're seeing an influx of callers who, are anti-science. There's always been a threat of anti-science in the United States, again, because of the coordinated effort to paint it as an elite institution that looks down on other people. But as somebody who's been in the debunking space for a long time and has lurked in it for even longer than that, there is a very strange shift happening in the things people are skeptical about. And I think it's a dangerous shift. I don't think it's a shift. It's not a welcome one. And I say this as somebody who, I prioritize education on evolution because that's my field and that's what I find most interesting. But actually, evolution denial is lower than it has been ever in the history of the United States. More people accept evolution right now than they ever have before. And it's not close, and it's pretty precipitous, that acceptance. I should say the acceptance of creationism has been in precipitous decline. So what's going on? Like, what's happening? It seems as though the anti-science rhetoric hasn't gone away. It's just changed focus. It's not anti-evolution that's holding the bag. It's anti-vax. It's homophobia and transphobia. It's anti-climate change. It's all sorts of different smaller, much more damaging pseudosciences that seem to be taking hold. And I don't know what the answer to that is outside of, see the first half of this monologue.
Do you suspect that sorry, I'm trying to put my thought together here. Do you suspect that basically the president plays some sort of a role in this because of how his views on science, he's sort of reversing a lot of the things that we've sort of come to just expect to be true. He's erased a lot of the hard work that we've done so far. I mean, I'm Canadian, what do I know? But I hear this in the news all the time, and I'm paying attention because whatever happens down south eventually comes north too. So, do you believe that there's a bit of a role played by the elite and sort of the role that they are showing, or I don't know. This isn't something I was originally wanting to talk about, but you kind of brought it up.
I mean, the president himself is, in my opinion, a symptom of the disease, not the disease itself. I think that the anti-science, anti-intellectual rhetoric took a populist turn because they realized that was their angle. Populism being this idea that it's like, oh, it's us versus them, and we're going to get what's right for you, and your opinion matters too. And it's like, okay, in theory, populism isn't bad in and of itself. It's bad when it's weaponized as it's being weaponized right now. Populism should never, ever be applied to areas that require expertise to function. Not a single industry on the face of this planet could function from a populist lens. And the reason is because take a factory, for example. Everybody's opinion on every issue in the factory is not weighed equally. It just isn't, because different people are better at different jobs because that's the job they trained for. It's not an intrinsic thing. They're not like inherently better. It's just the thing that they put their work into to become an expert in. You wouldn't ask the elevator manager to handle a conveyor belt problem. You know what I mean? But populism applied to industry and applied to science and applied to education, that's exactly what you get. Everybody's opinion is equal to everybody else's opinion. Everybody deserves a space on the stage, and everybody deserves a place to state their opinion. And while everybody's opinion Everybody is allowed to have an opinion. Absolutely, for sure, 100%. I believe in that. I think that's an important value of this country and of a democracy in general. But we cannot, as a functioning society, weigh every opinion equally on every subject. It is not sustainable. Of course, by doing exactly that, you get to demonize, I should say, if you're the Heritage Foundation, you get to demonize the institutions that are scientifically showing that your ideology and everything supports it is bullshit and bad for people. So you have to demonize them, or else you can't stick around. People won't support you. So I mean, I happen to think that this is the end game, or near the end game, of a very long 50 to 60 year long campaign to intentionally boost anti-intellectualism and make people think that education is bad and knowing stuff is elitist. As I said earlier, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I'm saying all of that to say I think that Donald Trump is sort of a, maybe not the peak, but a peak of all of this, right? He sort of represents the populist triple point, maybe is the word, like a critical threshold. Like this cannot persist for much longer. We're about to start feeling the consequences. And we'll see how quickly people backpedal once those consequences arrive, because they will arrive. It's too late to stave them all off. And, we'll see if we learn a lesson from it or not.
Mm-hmm. If Sorry, I also may give I give a ray of hope?
Please.
Because even with the current administration, the current heads of our branches of government, I want to point out something. Originally, the president wanted to slash the NASA budget, especially in the science section, by over 50%, 50%. Congress actually pushed back on that. And this is a Congress that doesn't even push back on the war powers of the current administration that's messing with you at the gas pump. So this group is so spineless, but they'll still say, but NASA's still worthwhile. How worthwhile is it? We just saw a successful moon mission, and the president called the astronauts while they were still on their mission and invited them to the White House for a photo op. Would this be possible if we still did not actually have some love and longing for science and engineering and exploration? We still have that drive. We just need to show how we're going to do a better job of steering that thing to the future rather than to the preferred direction that various corporatists or religious institutions would rather it go for their own short-term gains.
Yeah, those 10 days were honestly some of the best 10 days in a very, very long time.
Yes, they were.
That Artemis mission.
They were very fun and very hopeful.
Yeah.
And Dr. Adair,
there's a popular.
If you have just a couple of
seconds. Sorry. I'll try my best to help answer, because you had time questions, and I'll do my best to help with both my lack of sleep and the hour as it is, but I will do my best to be helpful.
Okay.
So, time. Specifically, you were talking about issues with time and in general relativity, correct?
Specifically, how does gravity, which I understand, now this might not be correct, but like when I think of gravity, I think of it as something that affects physical things, right? We see the effects of gravity every day.
Mm-hmm.
Time, to me, is not a physical thing. And I'm struggling to understand, because so recently there's been numerous movies that have dealt with relativity. There's been Interstellar, there's been the Buzz Lightyear movie that dealt with it, right? And they all represent this concept where, based on the perspective of the person, time is moving faster for us on Earth than it is where they are. And I'm trying to understand how gravity affects time.
All right. So, indeed, this is not exactly obvious stuff. The first thing that comes into play is what Einstein is able to show with special relativity, that there is an intrinsic relationship between space and time, such that any two events in space-time will always be a finite, quote-unquote, space-time distance. So that if you are traveling faster, this affects how you are measuring time in such a way that you always measure the speed of light to be the same no matter what reference frame you're in, but you don't agree on what your clocks and your rulers say between different observers. So you already get that kind of weirdness. But even special relativity originally just deals with what we would call a flat space-time, that your measuring stick doesn't just change with speed, but it even changes its length with other things around it. Because what Einstein then does with his stuff with general relativity is says massive bodies actually change the shape of space-time itself. More accurately, we'd say it changes the geometry of space-time. Now, this sounds super weird, but it's strangely enough simple in the following way. You might know Newton's first law: an object in motion tends to stay in motion. And we would say if you are acting no forces on a thing, it will go in a straight line. The more general statement is that it will take the shortest path between 2 points. And on a flat space-time, well, that's a straight line. But when you have something curved, you may not take a straight path. So for example, here on the Earth, what's the shortest distance between New York City and Japan? You actually go north and towards the North Pole and then come back down. But on a curved surface, you try drawing a line like that and you realize, oh, this is actually the shortest distance to go across the surface of the Earth because of the curvature of the Earth. Something you would miss if you were just using a flat Mercator projection of the Earth, for example. A similar thing is happening with massive bodies changing the geometry of space itself. What becomes the shortest path between 2 points looks curved from another point of view. And this creates some interesting effects that, for example, the shape of that background space, that geometry of that background space, can be a little different at one point of your body than another. And this makes it so like the top of your head and the bottom of your feet traveling along on space-time would actually be covering slightly different distances if you are in some sort of gravity well. If you're traveling different distances, this is going to make it so you no longer appear to be moving in a straight line at constant velocity. You're somehow now changing. This, strangely enough, creates the effect that we call gravitational acceleration, not from a force, but from the shape of the space-time around you being different than just everywhere the same at all points. Fundamentally, what the equation of Einstein's special theory says, mass tells space-time how to change its shape, and the shape of space-time tells you how mass will move through that space-time. And the math to do this is both beautiful and horrendous. It's beautiful in that it's just a few symbols. It can be written on like one line of a piece of paper. But to solve the problem, you are actually solving 16 partial differential equations simultaneously, which is a way of saying, holy shnikes, who would do this to themselves? Must be a regular Einstein that would do this. Funny enough, there's only a handful of exact solutions to Einstein's field equations. A lot of the other work is basically you pump it into a computer and you do approximations because you can only get so far with just doing it analytically, step by step, and doing all the algebra and calculus steps. I don't know how much this is ultimately helping you, but the fundamental thing is with massive bodies, how you measure space and time changes from position to position as you get further and closer from masses. And this creates the effect that we call gravitational acceleration, what appears to be the gravitational force.
So it's something that if I'm understanding correctly, with our reference, would be difficult to see or to witness. But when you're talking about like planetary bodies or black holes, things of that size, would be maybe a little bit easier, right? Because if I understand correctly too, when we send a satellite into orbit, we can synchronize the clocks, right, with NASA and the satellite, whatever. And depending on what kind of orbit it has, those two clocks will vary by microseconds or something, right? Like it's not a lot, but like we're not talking a minute or an hour or whatever, but we're talking about like half a second, something like that.
It's enough that with our GPSs, I'll note this, while the effect might be small in terms of like what fraction of a second this does, but with our GPS systems, if you were not accounting for relativity, our GPS systems would actually be off on the order of miles. So it's a serious effect once we're actually applying it.
Yeah, that's really that's impressive to think of, right? Like just, I don't know. I find this stuff so interesting. I wish, and maybe I have to I don't know, sign up for like a free class or something from one of the universities here or something. But
looks like my signal has gone bad.
Learn more about this.
Yeah. Oh, it might be me. Looks like my signal's bad too. Hope it's not Zoom.
Okay.
I'm back. Sarah, can you still hear us?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. You're gonna have to repeat what you said a minute ago.
No, just that maybe I'll seek out some. I know some of the universities here offer free lessons or free classes. You can like sit in on their lectures and stuff. I'll learn more about it.
Hell yeah, my friend. My brain would explode and splatter everyone if I were to do that. This shit drives me bonkers. It's so complicated.
I will note, of course, a lot of the calculations are already done for GPS satellites, so you don't have to redo them by hand, let alone constantly. And funny enough, when it comes to the effects of special and general relativity with GPS satellites, the corrections they produce actually go in opposite directions. When the satellite is in orbit, it's going to be going faster than you on the ground, so it has time dilation because of that speed. But because you're further away from the Earth and you're now in a weaker gravitational field, then you get less of that time dilation there. So the two effects go in opposite directions, and you have to account for them both correctly. So that way they don't perfectly cancel out, but they also don't add up, which would really make your whole system off. So yeah, there's plenty of things that make this a little bit complicated. It's almost like we have to pay rocket scientists to make this work.
Yeah. I'm glad it's them and not me.
That's how I feel.
I appreciate both of you and also, everyone on the line. You guys are doing great work. And thank you for talking to me a little bit about the difficulty in science education, because honestly, I think if we could crack this, then we'd have a lot less problems in the world.
Oh, don't I know it? Don't I know it? We'll crack it. We'll get there. It might be long after our dead, but we the human species will crack it or go extinct try.
The AI's after us. We'll get it figured out.
Yeah, we need more programs like Bill Nye, because growing up watching that was absolutely amazing.
Man, I know it. I'm hoping that one positive thing about the decentralization of entertainment and of media is that there are so many good science communicators out there doing such amazing work. It's like surely people can find someone who works for them. You know what I mean? Like a science communicator that they like.
Yeah.
Dr. Adair is really loving that. He's still so fun.
Thank you again.
Oh, I'm frozen
I'll let
again.
you guys
Okay.
get on.
Of course. Thanks so much, Sarah. Appreciate it. Take care.
Take care.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
You were
Move again.
you were giddy. You were so excited. Just thought you were grinning ear to ear about the idea of good science communication.
Yeah, and I got stuck in a black hole, so I was just, frozen in time as that was happening. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Frozen in time from your point of view. For me, time passed normally, which
course.
is one of the weird things that happens. If you were to jump into a black hole, you, Erika, observing me jump in, you would see me actually never enter the black hole. You would see time for me slow down more and more, and I would never even actually reach the event horizon. From my point of view, I jump through and I pass the event horizon like it's nothing. But when I look back up, I see all the future of the black hole as I look up. So I learned all sorts of things, but I'm not able to tell you anything about it because I'm stuck in the black hole.
What a cosmic joke. Okay, speaking of cosmic jokes, $5 from William Metz, 1991. How come you can only hear pterodactyls go poop in the bathroom? Because their pee is silent. The pee is silent. Erika loves potty puns. They will find your body in a septic tank. William Matz, 1991. One of my least favorite bronies, but not number one. You guys.
Well, this brony decided to give us another $5 super chat. So William Matz, 1991, also would like to say, want to know how I describe the pygmy marmoset at the Buddhist temple? A little monkey. Monkey pun for Erika.
Why wouldn't it just be a Y? Why would it be EE? William Matz, why would it be EE? I'll feed you to my pygmy marmosets. They'll tear your flesh from bone. $10 from Elizabeth Chris 5443, but I do love seeing this little cat. White Castle. Oh my god. White Castle is unquestionably the best, full stop. This actually might be more offensive to me than any of the puns. This is crazy. This is an unhinged take. Lux, can we ban this person for this kind of perspective? Look, Aaron is frozen. He's aghast. He is aghast at this. You killed him. You killed him by doing this, Elizabeth Prince. Be gone from me. I don't want to see you again. I don't want to see your name grace the super chats again. You're dead to me. That's an insane take.
I apologize for being frozen. I think I got lost both in a time warp with Harold and Kumar on the way to White Castle.
I mean, it causes you real psychic damage as a perspective.
But psychic damage, now we got from Ray Gatto, a nice $10 super chat. Why was Darth Vader referred to as Lord Vader? Because calling him Master Vader made all the stormtroopers giggle.
I don't know that this is a pun. This is borderline. But I do think I like seeing Ray Gatto's cat.
Yeah.
And it's always
also, that's a normal joke, it feels like.
Yeah, I feel like that's not. I feel like that's a standard joke.
I also think there was a lost opportunity because, as everyone knows from watching the prequel trilogy, that Anakin Skywalker was greatly insulted when he was able to sit on the High Council, but was not given the title of Master. So he was not Master Skywalker. So the whole avoiding calling him Master Vader is also because of this psychic problem that Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader has because of his mistreatment. There's a lost opportunity to not continue to hammer away two things about Anakin Skywalker: never given the rank of Master and not good with high grounds.
And he doesn't like sand because it gets everywhere.
It's coarse, gets everywhere. I don't like it.
Fair
Only
enough.
he had good dialogue.
It's a fair enough perspective. $10 from the Atheist Mechanic. Love seeing this little snake, this cute little snake. Erika, which Pokemon is my fave? I'm assuming one of the monkey ones, but I didn't want to just assume. Do you have any faves either, Dr. Adair? You know what? So I love all of the monkeys, right? Like I love Mankey, I love Primate, I don't really love the Simi-Seer, the Panseer, the Simi monkeys, whatever, from Gen 5. Obviously, I have a Chimchargal. Infernape is my goat. I even like Rillaboom, the later Griller style starter. I like Orangarang. I think that's how you say it. And the lemur one, whose name I forget because that was a little late in the game for me. But I actually do have some favorites that are non-monkey related or non-primate related. And one of them, I love Swampert. I'm a big Swampert fan. I think Swampert is adorable. I love Mudkip. I think Marshtomp sucks. I think that thing is hideous, but the either ones on either side I love. I'm also a sucker for Ampharos. I think Ampharos is really cute. And I always got a Mareep when I played Gen 2 just because the electric coverage was always really nice. I like Flygon. I'm a Flygon fan. I think it's adorable. I like its little goggles. I'm sad that it doesn't have a Mega evolution. Oh, I love Garchomp and Luxray. Those are both Gen 4. Let me see about I like Charmeleon. I think Charmeleon's cool. I think it's cooler than Charizard is. Actually, all three of the middle Evos from Gen 1 are really great. I like a lot of Pokemon. There are a lot of Pokemon that I really love that are like, they always get a spot on my team. You know what I mean? Dr. Adair, you got a favorite Pokemon? He's getting Snorlax right now, eyes closed. You're frozen again.
Again, my goodness. Lux, can you give me more bandwidth, please? This is getting a little embarrassing. I am not, while Snorlax and I might be kindred spirits from time to time, not at this moment. Now, my answer. Okay, so I have only played Gen 1, and I'm going to answer this by saying which was the best starter Pokemon. And for that, objectively, I was about to say the wrong thing. Bulbasaur. No, not Bulbasaur. Sorry, no.
Squirtle?
Who becomes Blastoise? Squirtle. Yes, Squirtle. Wardle. Yes. Yeah. Squirtle, objectively the best choice as your starter Pokemon in Gen 1 there. I will also note some Pokemon that I wish were better, but weren't programmed correctly. So I really wish I could have gone and really enjoyed some of the Ghost Pokemon, because Ghost type was supposed to be the only type that would have been good against Psychic. But the Ghost Pokemon there, when you actually look at them, they're actually Poison type. So they don't have the strength against Psychic, and then they have all the weaknesses of Poison type, which, I would say that's a programming flaw, because I would have liked if Ghastly could have helped me in my battle with Mewtwo, but it didn't work out that way.
Well, Gen 1 was weird too, because first of all, Psychic type was really OP, but also Dragon was really OP, but there was one Dragon move, and it was Dragon Rage, which did stock damage, which is insane. That's crazy. Yes. But if I also may add something from a later generation, just because it would be absolutely ridiculous if I were to play Pokemon again, I would go for and have a level 100 Bidoof. Bidoof? I love Bidoof. I think Bidoof
just because of the absurdity of leveling up that creature and not even letting it evolve. Just massive power, overpowered Bidoof.
Bidoof level 100 with return, though. It's going to be pretty good. I mean, I always had a Bidoof early on in Gen 4 for the HMs, because Gen 4 was still HM, and Bidoof could learn almost all of them. It was really great.
Yeah.
HM Pokemon.
And I'm going to say it's mostly Bidoof because of the mustache. If I could somehow take the mustache and put it on Geodude, that would be ideal.
Bidoof mustache? Bidoof does not have
it looks like a mustache.
Bidoof mustache?
At least that's what it looks like to me.
Okay. I thought you were talking about Cricketune, but that's fine. The whoop, that one. That's going to be a treat for anybody out there. I just saw a super chat that's coming in later. That's crazy. Yeah, anyways. Lux, next super chat. Thank you. Sweet. Oh, wait, this is
right. Yes, $5 from HTZ11235. Oh, so HTZ Fibonacci sequence. Gotcha. Okay.
Ooh.
Please discuss your current work projects with as much technobabble as possible. I'm talking nearly indecipherable. Thanks. Okay, thanks. Okay. I got several for you. All right. One thing I have in the publication pipeline right now with my group at MIT, that we are using a hierarchical Bayesian model for approaching nominal response models in psychometrics and education theory, that we are applying some additional machine learning techniques such as stochastic variational inference in order to optimize such a model and pull out student misconceptions in a multidimensional version of earlier nominal models that have been popular in the field. That's one of the papers that's currently in the pipeline, or I should say currently in review with a publisher right now. On my own, I have an article going through right now where I am applying factor analysis and item response theory to folklore studies and specific models of heroism, and actually measuring heroism as a phenomena in cultures and mapping out the transference of a particular hero type from antiquity and making it as far as New Zealand, as far as I can tell. That's another thing. And most recently, I have been using an approach with stylometrics that's a combination of character engrams, TF-IDF for weighting, support vector machines to create a classifier, so that way I can identify interpolations into a text when I have a suspected author as the source of that interpolation, using large corpora in the ancient Greek language.
That worked for me. I understood Bayesian of the first bit, but after that, not so much. I'll just tell you what I'm doing for my dissertation. I am trying to assess sexual dimorphism in the maxillary and mandibular canine teeth of Miocene stem catarrhines. And the way that I am doing this, because it's virtually all dental samples and it's really, really, really hard to know whether or not you're looking at one dimorphic species or two monomorphic species, because primates can be both. So I came up with a method for identifying taxonomic rank using a multinomial logistic regression that's Bayesian in technique. That's performed after running I work with shape data of teeth. So basically I cut the tooth at the cementum enamel junction and then also 50% up the tooth for unworn teeth. And I landmark them using fixed landmarks at the maximum mesiodistal and buccolingual lengths and widths respectively. Of those landmarks, 24 landmarks, 4 are fixed, the rest are sliding. And then those get fed into R, where I expose them to I run them through a general Procrustes analysis. So that's a GPA to sort of remove the effects of scale and rotation and general size. And then after that, I run a PCA on them, which is a basic principal component analysis, which sort of finds the maximum lengths of variation in an nth dimensional plane, because you have a dimension for every landmark, which in this case would be 24. So 24 dimensions, you have to sort of cram them together. That's the purpose of the PCA, is to sort of reduce the dimensionality of the data. Then I run a CVA, or a canonical variate analysis, which effectively finds the best way of separating out pre-established groups. And then I use a leave one out cross-validation test to basically train the model on every tooth besides one, and then see if, based off of that training data, it can accurately place the final tooth. The purpose of which being, I will create a model on known specimens, because molars are really easy to identify in Miocene apes. So I'm going to assign or train the model on mandibular and maxillary remains, so teeth that are in the jaws, like still in the mandible or the maxilla, so the bottom part or the top part of the jaw. Train the model on that, and then use my Bayesian multinomial logistic regression to leave one out cross-validation test to try and assign taxonomic rank to those which are iffy. And usually these are going to be worn or busted up teeth. After that, the sexual dimorphism will be assessed using 6 different methods. Really, it's 5 different methods: the mean, median, BDI, method of moments, and PD peak. Yeah, really 5 methods to assess sexual dimorphism without assigning sex beforehand. This is great because you can be used for pooled specimens. Basically, it looks at the mean and standard deviation of the sample and will assign sex in some cases on the basis of where they fall within those values. And then for method of moments and PDP, it's a little bit more complicated and a little bit more Bayesian. And then I will place those specimens based off of my prior assignments taxonomically. So paper number 1 was, do these methods work on extant taxa? Check, that's done. Paper number 2 is assigning those methods to the fossil taxa, which I'm doing right now. And then paper number 3 will be applying those sexual dimorphism estimation methods to my placed specimens using my own methodology. And hopefully this will help clear up the taxonomic rank, or I should say identity, of the enormous but absolutely discombobulated Miocene ape fossil record. That's my project.
2 things came to mind when you were saying that. One thing that I wasn't so sure of, you mentioned doing Procrustes, but then doing PC afterwards. It seems like you don't have to do Procrustes beforehand, because Procrustes doesn't change the underlying information, it just rotates it, PCA would still pull up the same dimensions in that sort of analysis.
The problem is the landmark data aren't standardized. So the purpose of the GPA, the generalized procrustes analysis, is in the landmark space, which I use 3D Slicer for. Since it's 2D instead of 3D, so you're working with a 2D picture and placing them on the cross section of the tooth that way. The shape could be anywhere on that plane. And it could also be rotated to the side because I slice the teeth in Blender and then I import that data into 3D Slicer. So in theory, the GPA is not necessary, but it is for the type of work that I'm doing.
Okay, well, it does make sense because before PCA, you are supposed to like normalize the different features, and it sounds like that's what this is doing. All right, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, and secondly, when it comes to your results, are you also doing bootstrap sampling to define the uncertainty in your results?
Yep. Unfortunately, I also had to do a power analysis to find out the minimum number of teeth that are actually required to get something meaningful, which you can kind of cheap your way out of that by adding your extant data because you need to have more samples. Your sample size needs to be larger in each group than the number of landmarks that you use. So if I'm using 24 landmarks, every group theoretically needs to have at least 24 individuals in it, which is fine for my larger taxonomic rank. So if I'm trying to parse the difference between cercopithecoids and hominoids or like non-ape stem catarrhines and ape stem catarrhines, it's easy because there's only 3 groups and there's hundreds of teeth in every group. But if you get down to like the species level, it's a lot harder because while I have a lot of teeth, for some species, there might be like 3 maxillary canines and like 8 mandibular canines. And they're not considered together. They're considered separately because the morphology, the maxillary and mandibular canines are unique. So bootstrapping is going to be necessary.
All right. Yeah, and it sounds like also for the nominal model, you're probably using the same math that I'm doing for like the basic IRT model. So if it's a rash model, it sounds similar.
I would be happy to send it to you because I've already sent it to 3 different statisticians because Bayes was new to me for this. The Bayesian edition was actually late in the game. So originally I was just running like my basic CVA, and then I had a linear discriminant analysis. And so it was like pretty standard stuff. But the problem was my data overlap a lot because you're dealing with some taxa that are sexually dimorphic. So the males in some of these species look more similar across species line than they do to their respective females. So you sort of have to aggregate the males and females to get a mean shape for the species, and then there's a lot of overlap. Anyways, that's why I had to include the Bayesian stuff to get a posterior distribution to know like, okay, is it misassigning this by a little bit or by a lot? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and where am I actually, what are my confidence with these different assignments? So it was a late in the game thing. I had to learn Bayesian statistics, which was completely new to me. And that took me 6 months because I was like, I don't know how Bayes works. I like sat down and it's not something, so for people who don't know, Bayes is really, there's a lot going on in it, and it's very difficult. Like the way that I learn math is I have to do it by hand. So I have to get an example that I understand and then walk through all the steps by hand. And there's like 6 quadrillion equations in shape space Bayesian analyses. So it was a hellish nightmare from the depths, from the pits of Hades. But I do understand it now.
There are some things about Bayes that are super easy and other parts that are not. So if I do just a quick screen share just so the whole audience knows about the fun that exists. This is Bayes' theorem in its really simple form. Really it looks really easy. Sense. Yes. Now, it can look a little bit more complicated if you have like the integral signs and doing some calculus stuff. But, you know, most things you can do with calculus. The problem is, especially this factor right here, the marginal probability here, sometimes this thing is literally intractable. There's like no closed form solution to that integral. And at that point, you basically say, hey, what approximation method am I going to use today? And that can be a project in itself, to put it very mildly. So yeah, it's both super easy and super difficult. We are nerding out. I'm also curious, Erika, if when it comes to like the sexual dimorphism stuff, if things like creating a linear discrimination analysis and plotting that might also help separate things out.
The linear discriminant analysis helps, but the problem is, again, there are some that are, we'll talk about it later, but I have, this is my comps notebook, and I have some like really cool drawings that I did for it, but I also just have pages and pages and pages and pages of equations and how does Bayes work and why does it work that way. Here's the one I tried to teach it to myself step by step, and this is like 20 pages of just like me trying to work through it. Like I said, I get it now, I think, but it's a lot. It's a lot, especially as Dr. Adair said, like you see the cute little formula and you're like, oh, that's not so bad. And then you work through it and you're like, I'm trying my best to make it not a black box too, because shape space, it's really, really easy with landmarks for it to become a black box. I'm pretty convinced that nobody who regularly runs PCAs actually knows the math behind a PCA. I couldn't do it off on the fly. I understand it. It's in my notebook, but I don't have my equations for the PCA memorized because there's like 10 steps and the equations are all very long and it's for every landmark. Anyways, I digress. $4.99 from 901. Magnificent. Okay, that was worth the money for that super chat, I believe.
Yes.
Is Newton classified as a scientist or a natural philosopher? What is the difference? That's a really good question.
Well,
I don't know. Do you want to take a shot at that?
I mean, first off, the word scientist just wasn't invented in Newton's time. The word scientist, I think, was coined in the 1830s, something like that. I forget the exact history, but it was like early 19th century that the new term emerges to describe the people focusing on science and having it as something separate from philosophy. Newton would have been called a natural philosopher. He did things that we would consider at least philosophical. I mean, there's obviously a lot of math he did. He did physical experiments. He did the sorts of things that we would use the modern term of scientist for, but he would not have used that terminology simply because it did not exist yet. Natural philosophy is pretty much an outgrowth of science is basically an outgrowth of natural philosophy. It's just that it's now become much more focused on method and being very discipline specific. Like when you get to the 19th century as well, the words natural philosophy or natural philosopher kind of die off, but you still have the naturalist, and that's what Darwin was referred to rather than a biologist. So, the words change their meanings, became specific to certain things. Words change, but we look at the reference and we say, what was Newton doing? Is it something that we would call science? I would say yes, though he also did some things that we wouldn't call science anymore, like all of his interest in alchemy. He might have approached things more scientifically than magically, but still, the boundaries of what science is now and what science was then have also changed.
We have $10 from Zachary Novak 2180. My call dropped. Sorry. My question was going to be, how do we understand cognitive flexibility in an organism? What environmental conditions select for it as it appears in our closer relatives? The number one best predictor of cognition, at least in primates, well, I should say of cognition as we generally consider it in science, is group size. And the reason, at least proposed by Dunbar, which I don't agree with everything Dunbar said, but I do think that he made a pretty salient point here. Big brains exist pretty universally in social animals, and the more complicated the social relationships, the larger the brain. And so you've got like a chicken egg thing. Like, do large brains evolve to help manage social relationships, or do large complicated social relationships form because big brains are there to handle them, and large brains actually evolve for something else? I think it's pretty common. I think it's pretty well accepted now that large brains are related to sociality in a major way, even if it's not the only reason for cognition to appear. And the reason, I mean, I think it's pretty intuitive if you look at like the biggest brained species within primates, but also outside of primates, the avian neocortex and intelligence in corvids and in parrots and things like that. What we see in proboscideans, like elephants, cetaceans, like whales and dolphins, large brains help you manage social relationships. Like managing social relationships well helps you secure resources, and good mates, which ends up aiding you enormously in securing your sort of genetic legacy there. So I would argue that it's group size, but more specifically, it's complicated social relationships, and also a lot of other things, but that's an easy way to sort of conceptualize it. Next.
And now we got $10 from Weston Campbell 1268. There is a term for that errand in the People's Republic of China. It is called Having Tea. Very scary. A past chat between me and my friend was read to him. Plenty of secret recordings of them. Matty, not sure what's being typed there at the end.
I don't know what that is either.
When I have visited China, it was while I was still a teacher, so I did not have much in the way for them to be interested in tracking me. But it is my understanding that yes, that if you are going to places like China, places like Russia, and you have something of interest to the authorities, you should assume that somebody is checking on you, to put it mildly. That's my understanding. Fortunately, I'm boring.
From Lil Leapy Girl, get some sleep. Museum near where I live. There's a cryptozoology museum near where I live, hoping to move. Their sign is coelacanth, a freaking coelacanth, because that's their success story. That's what cryptozoology does. Is they're like, look at all the times we found animals that we thought were gone, and then actually they weren't. And then it's like, yeah, but what about all the times that didn't happen?
All right. So, £5 from Mystic Mind Analysis. I can't call in today, but I have one burning paleontology question. What was the selection pressure that drove whale evolution? Citation needed.
This was the other brony I was talking about earlier. They're vying for my bloodlust here today. I don't know if they're actually asking this, but it probably has something to do with the massive amount of niches that opened up for large, swift, warm-blooded marine predators after all of the marine reptiles went extinct during the KPG. Or the dinosaur extinction, I should say. 1999 from Darth Willow. I thought I wanted to learn everything, but that's impossible. So the first thing I had to learn was how to recognize expertise so I could lean on those experts who have the key knowledge I need but don't have the time to learn. That's exactly it. And everybody does this. Everybody does this. This is why we're such a successful species a lot of the time. I'm assuming this is a continuation. 1999 from Darth Willow. What tickles me is if I say I'm an atheist, suddenly I'm challenged on science I don't know the answers to. Why do I have to know about stuff that scientists are still studying to prove I'm qualified to not believe in your God? Yes. Well, you unfortunately are under a different set of standards than the people you are arguing with. Thank you very much for your donations.
And now a nice $10 donation from the Atheist Mechanic. Anyways, back to the monad.
Praise be. $5 from Steven Clinard. Steve N.G. Clinard. What is James Torr's favorite Alicia Silverstone movie? I'm going to know it when I see it. It's Clueless. It's Clueless. That's good. That's a good joke.
$5 from the Pew Breaker. I hereby pledge myself to aid in the propagation of the mutant X-Men gene that will strengthen our bones against creationism.
There are many creationists that I think are wonderful people, and there are creationists that I would use my newly densified bones to use. I'd haymaker them, just or whatever this one is, where I leap on them with my elbow. $5. Well, maybe not. $5 from Steven Clinard. RNA is not intelligent because it has not liked and subscribed. That's so true. And if you're out there and you haven't liked and subscribed and you claim to be a supporter or enjoyer of this channel, then I think you might be a fake fan. And that really sucks because your likes and subscriptions are what help us keep the lights on over here. So I don't know.
$5 from Joshua Everett 9887. Aaron, talking to me? You talking to me? Okay. What is the closest to magic physics process or mechanism that you have ever learned about? And is that thing now fully or mostly understood? Weirdly enough, the thing that's popping in my head that is still, kind of amazing when you really think about it deeply and realize what it actually takes to explain it. Magnets. How do they work? And I say that because not only because of the Insane Clown Posse, but more importantly, when we teach students that you get magnetic fields from moving charges. So you think, okay, yeah, electricity and wires, I can make an electromagnet, sure. But what about a bar magnet? I go and I reach a bar magnet, I don't get electrocuted. There's no obvious flowing current in a bar magnet, and yet it produces a magnetic field. And why are two magnets attracted to each other? Because the other thing is that the magnetic force only exists when you have a moving charge in a magnetic field. So why would two magnets next to each other attract each other if there's no moving currents? When you really stop and think about it, it's like, hey, wait a minute, everything I've been told about what magnets are and how electricity and magnetism are related don't make sense. And to fully explain what's going on with magnets, you actually have to go into quantum mechanics. You have to talk about the spins of electrons, the alignments of such spins in regions and in domains in there. And that's the sort of approach you have to even begin to explain the origins of magnetic fields in ferromagnets. I think that is still kind of magical in how it ultimately works, that we do understand very well. Electromagnetism is not a real mystery in modern physics. But when you actually stop and think about what you were told in like your 100-level physics class and realize it doesn't explain that basic thing on the refrigerator, you really do need to stop and say, hey, what else don't I understand and know about? And that's something worth pointing to. That seems ordinary, but is actually requires extraordinarily small things to truly appreciate.
We have, oh my God, $5 from SJL. Love seeing this pup, though. My understanding of Zeno's paradox, it only works if the moving point is a dimensionless point, and the dimensionless points don't really exist in reality. Yeah, same. I was thinking the same thing, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
The paradox, I mean, that's one way to get around it, is say you just can't infinitely divide up space. That is one way to prevent the paradox, but the paradox can be resolved even with infinitely dimensional or divisible space. It's still the case that you can divide all those up and still get a finite amount and not have that problem. You don't need to invoke physics to avoid Zeno's paradox. What we can invoke is Ray Gatto and his adorable kitty giving us $5.
Aww.
Now, what does Ray Gatto have to say? If you are expecting any more Star Wars jokes from me, then you are looking in all the wrong places.
You're setting yourself up for a really painless death here when I construct an IRL Death Star and vaporize you and the planet you're on, which happens to be this one. Everyone will suffer for your sins. 750 pounds from Whooper Z. I want to show support for the show, but I wasn't sure what to type. So here's a quote for today. To infinity and beyond, someone from Star Wars. That's so true. So true, Whooper Z.
Yes.
My favorite.
It's definitely from Star Wars if you get sufficiently buzzed.
Oh. Okay. This one's you.
Is that what stretch?
I love seeing Joshua Everett's little cat. Oh wait, is this me? $5 from Joshua Everett. Unless I'm shaking hands with them and they give me a DNA or whatever they have sample, it's not aliens. I don't know. I think I would be pretty convinced if there was like a comical flying saucer that was like in front of me and like moving around and like non-ballistically. I think I would be like, that might be. I'd be like, that might be.
I kind of like the idea that it's something that Neil deGrasse Tyson mentioned in the context of alien abductions. That if you were being abducted by aliens, just grab like anything on the ship, even the alien ashtray, and bring that back with you, because we'll clearly be able to look at that and see that the material science of even their cheap things is so beyond us that we're going to instantly tell, yeah, this is clearly not made by humans. That would already be amazing evidence. So yes, if you happen to get abducted, grab anything off the shelf or whatever the equivalent of a shelf is on the UFO.
Put it in your mouth. They won't look there.
Yes.
This one's you.
Yes, $5 from SJL. I'm pretty sure dogs have handedness. I don't know if my dog is dumb or just stupidly single-minded.
I have a buddy who did research on in theses in the first metacarpal, which is the thumb bone, this thumb bone right here, actually. Actually, it's this one right here. Anyways, handedness is really interesting, and there's a rich literature for it. 10 Canadian dollars from Pure Reform 42, Tales from the Reign of Erika, the Dark Years of Punner Re-Education. If I was in charge, I would fix all the world's problems, beginning with mandatory re-education fun camps to train people to not use puns anymore. And the way that I would train them is punning is punishable by death. It's very simple. It's a good motivator, actually, it turns out.
Yes. The re-education camps, just like they worked for Chairman Mao, and no repercussions at all.
Of course,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying, right? You know, it's all fine. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it too hard.
Instead, I'm going to think about reading this $20 super chat from Regex74. Regex expressions, I hate those. They're so painful. Oh, sorry, wrong context. The rise in science denial and demonization in general that targets the marginalized is due to the rise of fascism. See Fascism and Social Revolution by Rajani Palma Dutt from 1934, still applicable today. I do not know that book, so I have not read it, but there is definitely a relationship between demonizing those who know things so you can prop up your authoritarian regime.
$10 from Ray Gatto. Did you see that Golden Tempo, who won the Kentucky Derby, declined the invitation from the White House, saying, if I had wanted to see a horse's ass, I would have finished second. If that is true, that's very funny.
That is the most base thing I've ever heard a horse say.
Golden Tempo.
Aha, $4.99 from Misinterpretations. Hi, Erika. Hi, Aaron. Who is quantum aging more quickly? People in Denver or people in New Orleans? Not necessarily quantum in the aging, but if you are in Denver, you're slightly further away from the center of the Earth, and so gravity would be a little bit weaker. On the other hand, if you are in New Orleans, you're further south, and so you would have a greater tangential velocity from the rotation of the Earth. So I don't know without doing explicit calculations. It's not obvious without me looking into it deeply. So good question. I do not know the answer.
We have $4.99 from Low Strider, 1022, apes eating out of a bucket. So how evolved are we actually? Very. It's a sophisticated form of eating. I meant it as a compliment.
To be fair, we invented the bucket. The monkeys, the other apes, have only inherited the buckets we share with them.
They can only dream of the buckets that we use.
On the other hand, monkeys have been well known for their barrel technology.
That's true. Yeah, they blast out of it, and they're coconut guns. $20 from President Starscream from Falcon Storm. An infinite number of patrons go to a bar. The first order's a beer, the second order's half a beer, the third order's a quarter beer, and so on. The bartender stops them putting down 2 beers. Know your limits.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Yes, and that is true. That is what you would get with an infinite number of beers where each beer is divisible by that amount. Yep.
This one's you. I like this.
Yes.
I like this strain of regular jokes we're getting tonight. This is rare.
So $5 from Hosenhofen. An elephant was walking through the savannah, sees a naked guy, walks up to him and asks, "How do you breathe out of that thing?" Wah, wah.
Or I read it beforehand, so I wasn't laughing as much. But yes, penises do look a little bit like elephant trunks. $20 from Elizabeth Chris 5443. At least I lack puns. Yeah, for now.
Also, quick thing when it comes to animal phalluses, isn't the elephant penis actually prehensile? They can actually maneuver it around like it's another limb.
So when you go, I've seen many elephants in the wild, and the safari guide or the people you're with, the researchers you're with, depending on the type of trip it is, they sometimes will call it the fifth leg because it is so, imposing and flexible. I'll leave you to ponder that. Wait, did you read this or is this me?
No, I think you need to read this one. This is $5 from Elishana Silverbow. No jokes today. I come in peace. Hi, Erika and Aaron. How can you come in peace on Star Wars Day?
We got $10 from One-Eyed Weirdo. Erika, you mentioned evolution of the human brain. That got me wondering, are there any theories as to why human brains evolved such that some of them are autistic? Am I misunderstanding evolution? Well, first of all, autism is not inherently a bad thing. There are versions of autism that I think can be trying for individuals, but there are versions that also aren't, that are just neurodivergence. That's part of normal human variation. There's also hypotheses out there that autism might be related to having a specific bit of Neanderthal DNA. And the idea is that if autism is related to Neanderthals, was that maybe just their standard way of being? And they were actually quite successful for a very, very long time. So there's it is a complicated bag that we're still, I think, trying to tease out, genetically speaking, I guess. But the short answer is selection is weird.
$5 from William Mates, 1991. How truly powerful is Magneto? MMFCL. I'm trying to think what that would stand for. Mighty Morphin Frickin' Counter Lover. I'm terrible with acronyms. But nonetheless, at least the way he's depicted in the comics, the fact that he can lift city-sized things up into orbit, that amount of work done is on the order of like nuclear bomb levels of energy to do that. So, yeah, don't mess with Magneto. Yeah, just don't.
We got $20 from Gentleman Viking. When little Timmy woke one day, thought it would be fun to make the host named Erika read out a dreadful pun. So little Timmy typed it up and posted it with pride. Alas, this is a limerick. And Timmy fucking died. That's the end. I know the little Timmy limericks. That's pretty good. I like that. I like that dog. It's accurate. It's cute.
I would say double yes. And now we have $10 from Bramley CX. Would that be Bramley 110? I'm not sure if it's becoming Roman numerals at that point. So, hello, Aaron and Erika. Did you know that the more different types of people you add to a group, diverse it gets?
I don't get this, Bramley. But yes?
Yeah, is it a joke or just a statement?
I don't know. $5, maybe she'll let us know. $5 from Malia Shauna Silverboat. Now I must respond to Aaron. I'm dealing with a lot in my life right now, and I don't have it in me to torture Erika with a pun, but I did wear a Star Wars shirt today. Man, I'm sorry you're dealing with a lot, my friend, but thanks for no pun and for the lovely donation.
And nonetheless, may the Force be with you.
This one's you.
Oh, yes. $9.99 from Outwitted by Fish. Oh, man. Me every day. There once was a man named McFisk, whose technique was exceedingly brisk. At the height of elation, the Lorentz transformation contracted his rod to a disc. This is a scientifically accurate limerick.
Wow. It's pretty creative.
If the rod going long ways is going fast enough, it will flatten in that direction enough that it could be actual disc-shaped to an outside observer.
All right, folks. Let me tell you what we got coming up. Tomorrow, we got Chewed Gum at 6 p.m. with Alyssa and Taylor. Lux is producing, and our screener is Dragon. Then we got Calling It Now, Tuesday's show at 8 p.m. with Jimmy and Javon. We got the Hang Up on Wednesday with Matt Dillahunty and Daryl Ray with Arden producing. We don't have a screener yet. Calling It Now is TBD. Then we got TACIS, the Transatlantic Cullen Show with Jack Riverboat and Luxander with Arden producing. And then that's at 2, followed by Calling It Now with Jimmy and Lux at 5, followed by the Line Podcast at 8 with just Jimmy for now. There is a Zoom with patrons this weekend at 3. And then on Sunday at 1 p.m., we've got allegedly Ian and Matt Dillahunty with Arden producing. Then we got Calling It Now. That's the Sunday show at 1. And then Calling It Now is at 4 with Siobhan and Lux. And then we get the Sunday show After Dark with Forrest and Owen with Lux producing and Paul W. as the screener. Folks, thank you so much for being here with us today. Dr. Adair, you got any final words?
Well, we might be celebrating Star Wars Day. Every day is a good day for science and science fiction.
There it is.
Live
there
long
it
and prosper.
Thanks, folks. Thanks to everybody. What's the thing Forrest does? Thanks to the callers, the screeners, even the ones that are bad, I guess. He says, thank you to the chat. Thanks to the chat. Thank you to my co-hosts. Thank you to our producers. I think I got everything. I probably missed something. See you next time.